Chapter 627. On the sacred battle platform, Qin Wentian's ancient halberd swept out, pointing directly at Lu Lan. Lu Lan's heart trembled when he saw Di Shi's death. Now that he saw Qin Wentian pointing his halberd at him, his countenance turned extremely unsightly to behold. Defeating and killing were two completely different concepts. The people here all had powerful trump cards. Unless the disparity in strength was too great, they wouldn't be able to kill their opponents. Before this, Lu Lan had the advantage when he fought against Qin Wentian, but he wasn't able to kill him. And now, Qin Wentian had comprehended a true intent despite being in a disadvantageous position, forcefully killing Di Shi. This indicated that Qin Wentian, who had comprehended a true intent, was in an extremely dangerous situation. His life might be in danger. The countenances of those from the Violet Thunder sect were all extremely unsightly to behold. They had arranged for Lu Lan to enter because they wanted to eliminate Qin Wentian. Lu Lan, who was at the peak of Heavenly Dipper and had comprehended a true intent of lightning, from their perspective, there was no doubt that he would be able to kill Qin Wentian. However, reality wasn't as they had imagined. Qin Wentian's extraordinary comprehension abilities allowed him to comprehend a true intent within the sacred battle platform. Although he was in a disadvantageous position, his combat prowess instantly surpassed Lu Lan's. "Come out!" Qin Wentian pointed to Lu Lan as he spoke. Lu Lan was the same as Di Shi. He had an agreement with Qin Wentian that only one of them could walk out alive. Initially, he wanted to restrict Qin Wentian's escape. But now, he was trapped in a cocoon of his own making. Even if he admitted defeat, it was useless. Either he died, or Qin Wentian died. "I've also comprehended a true intent. What's there to fear?" Lu Lan silently mused, as though he was encouraging himself, suppressing the terror in his heart due to Di Shi's death. At his level, how could he bear to die? But Di Shi, one of the 8 era-suppressing geniuses, had died before his eyes. This made him understand from the bottom of his heart that this was a true battle of death. How could Qin Wentian spare someone who wanted his life? Lu Lan, who was bathed in lightning, stepped out. However, he seemed to have lost some of his aura. He was no longer as wild and domineering as he was when he first fought against Qin Wentian. Evidently, he wasn't as confident in his own strength as before. The two of them stood facing each other. The air was filled with destructive lightning energy, but at the same time, there was also an intense pressure. The lightning energy was aimed at Qin Wentian, while the pressure was aimed at Lu Lan. It made him feel as if there was an omnipresent pressure pressing down on him, making him feel extremely uncomfortable. Releasing his astral souls at this moment, Lu Lan didn't dare to hold back any longer. The might of his lightning grew even stronger as he slashed out with a lightning sword in his hands. A bolt of lightning arced through the air, aiming for Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian had already moved the instant Lu Lan attacked. He could sense every single strand of energy in this space. When Lu Lan moved, he could also sense it. The ancient halberd pierced out. This strike was incomparably accurate, and when it whistled through the air, it contained a terrifying power that caused people's hearts to tremble. Pung! The tip of the ancient halberd directly collided with the lightning, causing it to disintegrate into dust. What a terrifying comprehension ability! Qin Wentian's usage of the true intent of his mandate has already surpassed Lu Lan. Many people understood in their hearts. Qin Wentian had just comprehended a true intent not too long ago, yet his comprehension of it had already surpassed Lu Lan. Other than talent, there was no other explanation. Golden wings appeared on Qin Wentian's back, as he was clad in golden rock armor. With a flap of his wings, his entire person transformed into a beam of light, leaving behind only afterimages in the air. Qi! The ancient halberd pierced out, aiming straight for Lu Lan's head. Even before the halberd arrived, that incomparably terrifying energy had already descended, causing Lu Lan to feel a strange sensation. It was as though an inexhaustible amount of energy from the heavens and earth was concentrated at the tip of the ancient halberd. As long as he was struck by it, he would die without a doubt. Regardless of which part of his body was struck, that energy would be able to destroy all vitality in an instant. A raging wind whistled as Lu Lan retreated. The lightning around him frenziedly converged as a terrifying ball of lightning blasted towards Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian's silhouette flickered as the wings of the golden rock arced through the air in a beautiful arc, instantly changing directions. At the same time, a powerful pressure bore down on Lu Lan, affecting her speed. Die! Lu Lan roared in rage as he slashed out with his lightning sword. The speed of the lightning attack was extremely fast, and it contained a terrifying destructive might. Qin Wentian lifted his palms and executed the star-seizing palms. His left palm shone with a resplendent runic light as divine energy erupted forth, slamming into the lightning attack, causing it to explode apart in the air. Busy. Yet another silhouette flashed past Lu Lan's eyes. Lu Lan unceasingly attacked, yet Qin Wentian would clash head-on with him every time. This repeated over and over again, giving Qin Wentian an immense sense of pressure. Qin Wentian chased after Lu Lan, frenziedly flashing about until the entire sky was covered in a golden shadow. Lu Lan is at too much of a disadvantage in this battle. Every single one of his attacks are all lightning-type attacks with terrifying destructive might, and the consumption of energy is extremely great. However, Qin Wentian's only reply is to use his ancient halberd to strike out. The majority of his attacks are focused on the true intents of his mandates, and the amount of astral energy he consumes is far inferior compared to Lu Lan. Not only that, Lu Lan's state of mind is already somewhat unstable. If this continues on, Lu Lan would surely be in deep trouble. Outside the sacred battle platform, the spectators murmured. At this moment, Lu Lan once again unleashed a destructive attack towards Qin Wentian. Just when he thought that Qin Wentian would retreat after a single strike, numerous afterimages of Qin Wentian appeared, each of them lifting their palms to destroy everything. At the same time, an ancient halberd appeared in Lu Lan's vision. Lu Lan's heart pounded violently. He abruptly clasped his palms together, directly grabbing hold of Qin Wentian's ancient halberd. The terrifying power of lightning caused his palms to be even sharper than blades. The lightning slashed apart the ancient halberd, directly breaking it into two. Courting death. Qin Wentian spat out. He directly put down the ancient halberd and blasted out with both his palms. In an instant, sword chi filled the skies, sweeping through everything. Numerous sword imprints containing terrifying destructive might penetrated through everything, shooting towards Lu Lan. At such a close distance, Lu Lan was undoubtedly relying on the destructive might of his true intent of lightning. He wasn't afraid of clashing head-on with Qin Wentian. Hence, at the instant he clasped his palms together, the destructive power of lightning and sword might frenziedly erupted forth, blasting towards Qin Wentian. But at the same time, Qin Wentian's palms blasted out countless sword imprints. Each and every sword imprint contained a terrifying destructive might, capable of annihilating everything. The crowd only saw beams of sword light flashing past as fresh blood flowed from Lu Lan's body. The 10,000 swords penetrated through his body. Lu Lan's floating body trembled as he stared at Qin Wentian with a venomous look in his eyes. He was a character at the peak of Heavenly Dipper, who had comprehended the true intent of his mandate, and had already broken through to celestial phenomenon. Yet today, he actually died on the sacred battle platform. Where did those sword imprints come from? The spectators felt their hearts trembling. So many terrifying sword imprints had actually erupted forth at that instant. One could very well imagine how dangerous it was to be in close combat with Qin Wentian. Impossible. In the direction of the Divine Weapon Academy, Wang Yunfei's countenance turned pale white. Even those seniors from the Divine Weapon Academy were shocked. Those sword imprints were the same as what Qin Wentian had achieved back then in the Divine Weapon Academy. With just a single step, fourth-ranked divine inscriptions could be seen. These sword imprints gave off a feeling that they were all fourth-ranked divine inscriptions. This indicated that Qin Wentian's earlier attack had already erupted with hundreds and thousands of fourth-ranked divine inscriptions. How terrifying was this? At such a close distance, how could Lu Lan not die? That's the second one. The spectators were all numb. The first one was killed by one of the 8 era-suppressing geniuses, and the second one was Lu Lan, who had comprehended the true intent of his mandate. At this moment, the faces of those from the Violet Thunder sect were flushed red. When they saw the countless gazes directed at them, they felt as though they were sitting on pins and needles. This time around, not only did they lose Lulan, they had also lost all face. Why did Lulan want to kill Qin Wentian, and even set up a life-and-death battle with Qin Wentian? Undoubtedly, the Violet Thunder sect was the mastermind behind all of this. But now that Lulan died in the hands of Qin Wentian, this was truly a slap to their face. Many people were already mocking the Violet Thunder sect. In Yi, they had lost Yi Kongfan and several celestial phenomenon ascendants. Now they even sought their own humiliation. Most probably, the name of the Violet Thunder sect, as one of the 9 great sects, would definitely become infamous. After Qin Wentian killed Lulan, he calmly returned to his stone platform and sat down. Out of the 9 era-suppressing geniuses, 2 had already been eliminated. Di Shi had fallen and Dongyue Hanjiang had lost an arm. In addition to Lulan, 3 of them had already been eliminated. Only 6 remained. In truth, at this moment, the crowd already understood. Although Li Tian and Qi Lian were also era-suppressing geniuses, if they couldn't comprehend a true intent of their mandates, it would be impossible for them to contend against Qin Wentian and Wu Teng. Even the Crown Prince of Radiant Gold was slightly weaker. No one knew if Fan Miaoyu was still concealing her true strength or not. However, very swiftly, the crowd saw that when Qi Lian challenged Fan Miaoyu, he was easily defeated by her. Fan Miaoyu revealed a type of true intent, the true intent of sound waves. From the start of the battle, Qi Lian had no way to retaliate. Fan Miaoyu's cultivation base was higher than his, and she had also comprehended a true intent of her mandates. Not only that, both of them were era-suppressing geniuses. After this battle, there were people who faintly felt that Fan Miaoyu was the strongest among the 9. Li Tian glanced at the 4 before him, feeling somewhat depressed as he spoke. There's no meaning for me to continue staying here. Wait until I comprehend a true intent of my mandates. If there's a chance, let's fight again. I admit defeat. The sacred battle platform opened, allowing Qi Lian and Li Tian to leave. Although the 2 of them were defeated, no one could deny their strength. As era-suppressing geniuses, the moment they comprehended a true intent of their mandates, they would instantly become extremely terrifying. In the blink of an eye, there were only 4 participants left on the sacred battle platform after all the battles yesterday: Qin Wentian, Wu Teng, Fan Miaoyu, and the Prince of Radiant Gold. Out of these 4, the strongest should be Fan Miaoyu, while the weakest should be the Prince of Radiant Gold, Qin Wentian, and Wu Teng. It's hard to say. This was the opinion of the majority. Fan Miaoyu and Wu Teng were on the same level, and both of them had comprehended a true intent of their mandates. Fan Miaoyu had the highest possibility of being the strongest out of the 4. How about we spar? Wu Teng stared at Qin Wentian as he spoke. He was filled with admiration towards Qin Wentian. Before the opening of the immortal martial realm, Qin Wentian was a nameless nobody, yet in a short span of a few months, he had already risen to such heights in the royal sacred region. Such a character was truly worthy of respect. Hence, although he wanted to spar with Qin Wentian, he didn't have any ill intentions. I will fight you after I recover to my peak, Qin Wentian replied, as though he was expressing his respect towards Wu Teng. Fine. Your cultivation base is originally lower than mine. Let's spar after you recover to your peak. Wu Teng smiled. He didn't insist. Qin Wentian closed his eyes again. Chapter 628. The atmosphere on the sacred battle platform turned silent. In the end, the 4 of them weren't in a hurry to battle, and chose to close their eyes in meditation. After a period of time, the Prince of Radiant Gold issued a challenge to Fan Miaoyu. The stone platform the 2 of them were on appeared in the center of the sacred battle platform. Resplendent golden light flickered and danced in the air. It was sharp and dazzling. These rays of golden light were like thin fragments of gold that gathered on his body, giving him a layer of armor. After that, they danced in front of his palm and a golden spear appeared. A terrifying sharpness permeated the air with him as the center. At this instant, this prince who was clad in golden armor seemed to be cast from pure gold. His defense was unrivaled, impossible to break through. Upon seeing how powerful he was, the crowd couldn't help but to doubt. Was he really the weakest among the 4 of them? The true intent of the mandate of metal, regardless of offense or defense, was extremely powerful. Chi-chi. An ear-piercing sound directly rang out in the eardrums of the prince. The ears of the prince from the radiant gold ancient country were instantly covered by a layer of gold. Fan Miaoyu had comprehended the true intent of the mandate of sound. This was an extremely rare type of true intent. She could use sound waves to disturb the state of mind of others, and even use sound waves to kill. Fan Miaoyu quietly stood there. However, the crowd could see the brows of the Prince of Radiant Gold furrowed, as though he was feeling extremely uncomfortable. He had no way to close his six senses. How could he block the invading sound waves? That ear-piercing sound rang out unceasingly in his mind. This sound was extremely unpleasant to the ears and could drive people crazy. The sound waves were formless and formless, causing people to be unable to sense that Fan Miaoyu was already attacking. The Prince of Radiant Gold no longer had any other sounds in his ears. His state of heart grew increasingly restless as his senses grew weaker. Although he had closed his ears, he was still being affected by the sound waves. The only thing he could do now was to attack, or he would be driven crazy. It was unknown when Qin Wentian had opened his eyes, staring at this battle. The Crown Prince of the Radiant Gold Ancient Country unleashed his attack, as his golden spear pierced out. Instantly, rows after rows of golden spears appeared, piercing towards Fan Miaoyu with unstoppable might. Fan Miaoyu finally stepped out. With a wave of her jade-like hands, numerous musical notes manifested in the air. Each and every one of the musical notes trembled as they blasted out, frenziedly slamming into the spear. Sounds of collision rang out unceasingly. As the sound of collision rang out unceasingly, the spear was shattered into pieces. Fan Miaoyu flicked her palms forward. Instantly, a formless sound wave gushed forth, forming a gigantic net that enveloped the Prince of Radiant Gold. A sharp light flashed in Qin Wentian's eyes. The power of sound waves was invisible and hard to capture. The indestructible golden spear in the hands of the Prince of Radiant Gold erupted forth. Although he managed to shatter several of the musical notes, the formless gigantic net was still able to envelop him. Bang bang bang. The body of the Prince of Radiant Gold was already completely enveloped by a layer of golden light. However, that golden shell of his was already riddled with holes. Although the power of Fan Miaoyu's musical notes couldn't be compared to physical attacks, it was still extremely terrifying. If it wasn't for the fact that the Prince of Radiant Gold had an extremely high defense, he would have already died in Fan Miaoyu's hands. Although the two of them hadn't unleashed their full strength yet, the ending of the battle was already foreseeable. When the Prince of Radiant Gold unleashed his overwhelming attacks, Fan Miaoyu actually continued to strengthen herself. Ultimately, the Prince of Radiant Gold could only choose to concede. After witnessing this battle, Qin Wentian was thinking, if he was the one fighting against Fan Miaoyu, what would the situation be like? Fan Miaoyu's control over the true intent of sound waves didn't lose out to his true intent of force. If the two of them fought, his chances of victory would be extremely slim. There was a high possibility that he would be defeated. With the Prince of Radiant Gold eliminated, there were only 3 participants left on the sacred battle platform. Qin Wentian, Wu Teng and Fan Miaoyu. Wu Teng. Qin Wentian suddenly spoke. Wu Teng turned his gaze onto him as both of them stood up. I really want to see if my true intent of axe is stronger, or if your true intent of force is stronger. Wu Teng spoke to Qin Wentian. In that case, let's fight using our true intents first. Qin Wentian replied as an ancient halberd appeared in his hands. Right. Wu Teng took out an axe as the two of them walked towards each other. All of a sudden, both of them attacked at the same time. Wu Teng's axe chopped down. It was as ordinary as ever, but the aura it exuded was as though he was chopping down a tree, easily cleaving it apart. Qin Wentian's ancient halberd directly collided with the axe. In that instant, Qin Wentian felt a surge of energy directly penetrating through his ancient halberd and into his body, cleaving him into 2. In just an instant, Qin Wentian loosened his grip on the ancient halberd. With a cracking sound, the ancient halberd split into 2 neatly from the middle. The cut was extremely smooth, as though it was really cleaved apart by an axe. Naturally, when Qin Wentian's ancient halberd broke apart, Wu Teng's axe also directly split apart. At the instant of collision, Wu Teng felt an all-pervasive force seeping into every single particle of the axe in his hands, wanting to seep into his body. If he didn't loosen his grip, his entire body would have been destroyed by this force. Although the two of them clashed in a simple manner, only they knew how dangerous it was. Awesome! Wu Teng was truly impressed by Qin Wentian. It hadn't been long since he comprehended his true intent. Yet he was already able to reach such a level. Again. Wu Teng laughed. This time around he condensed his astral energy into an axe as the two of them rushed towards each other, clashing against each other using the true intent of their respective mandates. True intent of mandates, truth, control. Qin Wentian didn't stop comprehending even as he fought. Ultimately, neither of them could do anything to the other. Let's stop our battle first. Wait for me to experience the true intent of sound waves. Wu Teng seemed to be in high spirits as he prepared for his next battle against Fan Miaoyu. Qin Wentian nodded his head. After which, he retreated back to the stone platform and closed his eyes once again, silently contemplating. The situation on the sacred battle platform caused the spectators outside to be speechless. Right now, the atmosphere inside wasn't as tense as before. This Wu Teng seemed more like a martial fanatic, wanting to test out different types of true intent instead of trying to prove himself. In this aspect, he was somewhat similar to Qin Wentian. However, after that, when Wu Teng and Fan Miaoyu sparred, Wu Teng was affected by the true intent of sound waves. He felt extremely stifled, and the two of them no longer restricted themselves to a battle of true intents. Instead, they erupted into an all-out battle, causing the spectators to be filled with excitement. This battle was a battle between the strongest two. Fan Miaoyu's strength was so strong that it was terrifying, while Wu Teng had once again surpassed the imaginations of the spectators. Other than his mandate of mandates, he had also infused his true intent into his innate techniques, allowing him to unleash a terrifying might. The two of them fought for an entire hour, and the battle was still ongoing. How powerful! The spectators were all stunned. At this moment, Wu Teng seemed to have transformed into an ancient war god. His axe techniques were so powerful that they could split the heavens and earth apart. Not only that, the shadow of a war god could also be seen, augmenting his combat prowess. Too powerful. Did Wu Teng manage to suppress Fan Miaoyu? The eyes of the spectators flickered with excitement. They finally understood why Wu Teng only used his true intent to fight against Qin Wentian, and didn't use his full strength against Qin Wentian. Wu Teng didn't want to bully Qin Wentian because his cultivation base was lower than his. If Wu Teng truly erupted with his full strength, Qin Wentian wouldn't be able to block him at all. Wu Teng is actually the #1 ranker of the sacred battle platform this time around? How shocking! Although Wu Teng is powerful, his fame in the past was far from being comparable to the era-suppressing geniuses. Wu Teng sent Fan Miaoyu flying through the air, causing the hearts of the spectators to pound wildly. You are very strong, but you are still a little lacking. Just admit defeat. Wu Teng stared at Fan Miaoyu as he spoke. Wu Teng of the war country. The people of the royal sacred region have all underestimated you. But today, you will still lose for sure. Fan Miaoyu's voice was calm. Wu Teng stared at her with some bewilderment in his eyes. After which, he felt another terrifying surge of energy gushing towards him. Wu Teng carefully sensed it, and after that he was completely dumbfounded. However, Wu Teng wasn't an ordinary person. He quickly regained his composure and bitterly smiled. Since you've already comprehended 2 types of true intent, it's not an injustice for me to lose this battle. I admit defeat. Wu Teng, you are a late bloomer, yet you have already utilized all sorts of different types of energy to the pinnacle. With such a steady foundation, when you step into the celestial phenomenon realm in the future, you would definitely be an extraordinary one. Fan Miaoyu felt a sense of sympathy towards Wu Teng. Do you know of Wu Mu? Wu Teng stared at Fan Miaoyu as he laughed. If it wasn't for Senior Wu Mu's guidance, although I myself am already very strong, I still wouldn't be able to defeat you if I wanted to use the same type of true intent. After speaking, Wu Teng calmly left the sacred battle platform. He had been accumulating strength for many years, and after receiving the guidance of the Realm Lord of the Immortal Martial Realm, It was only because of this that he erupted and became famous throughout the sacred battle platform. Although he was defeated, everyone here understood that Wu Ting's name would soon be known by many. Being able to suppress Fan Miaoyu while using the same type of true intent, there was no need to mention how strong he was. The strongest is still Fan Miaoyu after all. She has actually comprehended two types of true intent. The hearts of the spectators sighed. This battle on the sacred battle platform was finally coming to an end. Fan Miaoyu was indeed worthy of being one of the 8 era-suppressing geniuses. Fan Miaoyu stared at the last person on the sacred battle platform, the person she admired the most. Back then in the immortal martial realm when he defeated her, this person had once told her that the era was changing, causing her to sigh with the feeling that a heaven's chosen would eventually be replaced by someone else. Qin Wentian seemed to have sensed Fan Miaoyu's gaze. He opened his eyes and smiled at her. Although the era is changing, I don't wish to be abandoned so early. At the very least, if you want to use me as a stepping stone to rise up, I'm afraid it won't be so fast. You should be proud of your battle achievements on the sacred battle platform. Fan Miaoyu stared at Qin Wentian as she continued. But today this place still belongs to me. Qin Wentian stared at Fan Miaoyu as a smile appeared on his face. He then emotionlessly replied, I'm afraid I have to disappoint you. Chapter 629. Qin Wentian's calm voice caused Fan Miaoyu to start. She stared at him in bewilderment, only to see that Qin Wentian's countenance was as calm as still water, with a faint smile on his face. You comprehended another true intent? Fan Miaoyu exclaimed in shock. In such a short period of time, Qin Wentian had already comprehended 2 true intents? Fan Miaoyu didn't dare to believe this. If it was only a single true intent, it might have been a sudden epiphany. Such a situation was common for many heavens chosen, including herself. She had only comprehended a second true intent in a single moment of enlightenment. But to consecutively comprehend 2 true intents, this was simply too shocking. Not only that, even if Qin Wentian had truly comprehended 2 true intents, he would only be at the same level as her. As for her cultivation base, she was at the peak of Heavenly Dipper, and was definitely much stronger compared to Di Shi, Lu Lan and the others. Qin Wentian's calm voice was filled with confidence. What did he rely on exactly? Qin Wentian didn't reply, indicating that he had already tacitly agreed. Fan Miaoyu suppressed her shock as she stared at Qin Wentian. Even if you have comprehended 2 true intents, I'm the same. If you want to defeat me here, I'm afraid you won't be able to do so. Let's give it a try. Qin Wentian spoke to Fan Miaoyu. Okay, be careful. Fan Miaoyu nodded. A heavy expression could be seen on her beautiful face. As the sound of her voice faded, a mist permeated the air, swiftly enveloping the entire sacred battle platform. Qin Wentian's vision was obstructed. He actually couldn't see Fan Miaoyu who was standing in front of him. True intent of water? Qin Wentian's perception gushed out, but at this moment, an ear-piercing screech rang out, causing his heart to tremble violently. He wanted to seal his ears, but the formless sound waves directly penetrated into his sea of consciousness. When sound reached another level, its ability to interfere with people was extremely strong. If an ordinary person heard this kind of sound wave, they would instantly lose their composure and roll on the ground, unable to bear it at all. Even Qin Wentian's perception was directly restricted. At this moment he felt extremely annoyed. What was even more frightening was that at this moment he was like a blind man. He couldn't see, he couldn't hear, and his senses were obstructed. He had become completely blind. No wonder Wu Ting admitted defeat. Qin Wentian thought to himself. If it was just 2 true intents, Wu Ting might have a fight. However, the combination of 2 true intents was enough to make Wu Ting despair. There was no need for a fight at all. Power. Qin Wentian was still controlling a strand of his perception to sense the existence of the true intent. At the same time, he unleashed his true intent. Numerous sound wave runes shot towards him. Qin Wentian slammed out with his palms, directly tearing them apart. Terrifying ice spears rained down like a waterfall. Qin Wentian brandished the ancient halberd in his hands, exuding a terrifying demonic aura. With a lift of his hands, He blasted out with rage, shattering the ice waterfall into pieces. Fan Miaoyu, who was outside, had an expression of shock on her face. Her true intent of sound had no way to completely block off Qin Wentian's perception. Just by relying on his control over the true intent of force, he could still sense where the attacks were coming from. In fact, he could even judge how strong the attacks were. However, a confident smile could still be seen in Fan Miaoyu's eyes. She was extremely confident in her own strength. In such a situation, even if Qin Wentian's perception wasn't completely cut off, he would still be like a blind man. She was already in an invincible position. Qin Wentian was able to block her attacks, but what if she used her true intent innate techniques to attack him in close combat? How long could Qin Wentian last? As she thought of this, Fan Miaoyu's silhouette flickered as she rushed into the mist. Qin Wentian was blind, but she wasn't. She could sense everything happening within. The runic light in her palms towered up into the sky as Fan Miaoyu instantly rushed into the mist. An ice-cold intent permeated the entire space, causing people to involuntarily shiver. She saw that even Qin Wentian's body seemed to be sealed in ice. The runic light in her palms abruptly transformed into an ice-long spear, explosively stabbing out. A terrifying rumbling sound rang out in front of her, as though a glacier had exploded. Pung! Qin Wentian's body seemed to have been directly struck. The ice-long spear stabbed into Qin Wentian's body as fresh blood flowed out. Qin Wentian stared at her with a venomous gaze. This scene caused Fan Miaoyu to start. Qin Wentian was killed by her so easily? This is impossible. Even Fan Miaoyu herself didn't believe this was real. She didn't have any killing intent towards Qin Wentian. Although she was somewhat jealous of his talent, it wasn't to the extent where she would want Qin Wentian to die just because of jealousy. However, the scene in front of her was so clear. Qin Wentian had truly died. True intent of dreams. Fan Miaoyu's countenance changed as she instantly retreated. However, she soon discovered that behind her, there were two other Qin Wentian silhouettes that were staring at her like a tiger eyeing its prey. With a wave of his palms, the sound waves blasted out. The two silhouettes were killed as fresh blood flowed out. However, this scene seemed to be real. Dream. Fan Miaoyu's countenance turned unsightly. She had never imagined what the true intent of dreams was like. But today she experienced it for herself. Maybe, as long as Qin Wentian retracted the true intent of dreams, everything would instantly return to normal. Those Qin Wentian silhouettes that were killed by Qin Wentian would no longer exist. She fell into a dream created by Qin Wentian for her. A dream that was embedded into reality. Fan Miaoyu unceasingly retreated. More and more silhouettes of Qin Wentian appeared, but they were all killed by her. After she retreated for a very long distance, she discovered that those dead Qin Wentian silhouettes were all moving towards her. This scene caused Fan Miaoyu to be stunned. The true intent of dreams. In this dream, Qin Wentian was the ruler of this dreamscape. Unless she could shatter the dream of Qin Wentian, she could only fall into this dream. An expression of struggle flashed in her eyes. Fan Miaoyu then spoke, "You win." As the sound of her voice faded, the silhouettes of Qin Wentian's silhouettes instantly vanished. At this moment, Fan Miaoyu discovered that even though she had retreated so far, she hadn't moved at all. She was at the position where she stepped into the mist. This indicated that from this point onwards, she had already fallen into the dreamscape. Fan Miaoyu's entire body was drenched in cold sweat. She only felt a cold wind blowing over her body. Could the true intent of dreams forcefully change the consciousness of others? She thought that she was moving, and that she was in Qin Wentian's dream. But to her astonishment, she discovered that this was also her dream. All the energy dissipated, and Qin Wentian's silhouette appeared. Only now did Fan Miaoyu understand where Qin Wentian's confidence came from. The rarely seen true intent of dreams actually had such terrifying control. Fan Miaoyu finally understood why she couldn't struggle free. It was because she herself didn't know what state she was in. She still thought that she was moving, so how could she struggle free? Unless someone attacked her and triggered her nerves. Only then would she be able to sense it and struggle free from the true intent of dreams. I've lost. You are right, the times are changing. You are already part of a brand new era. I hope you can continue growing until you become a legend. Fan Miaoyu swiftly recovered from her defeat, as she smiled at Qin Wentian. You are also very strong. If I had comprehended other true intents, it would be extremely difficult to defeat you. Qin Wentian seriously spoke. Fan Miaoyu's true intent was able to disrupt the vision and perception of others, causing them to become blind. The two of them spoke like they were friends, yet great waves of shock rocked the hearts of the spectators. Qin Wentian actually won, becoming the sole victor today. Even a powerful existence like Wu Tung had to admit defeat before Fan Miaoyu. Yet Qin Wentian actually made Fan Miaoyu concede. As one of the era-suppressing geniuses, Fan Miaoyu had a cultivation base at the 9th level of Heavenly Dipper, and had comprehended 2 types of true intents. Even someone like her couldn't defeat Qin Wentian. There were simply too few people at the Heavenly Dipper realm who could defeat Qin Wentian. You don't have to be humble. You are only at the 7th level of Heavenly Dipper. It's hard to imagine how terrifying you would be when you step into the 9th level. You who have comprehended 4 types of true intents, in addition to your powerful innate techniques, as well as various other techniques, I believe that you would even be able to fight against celestial phenomenon ascendants, jumping levels to do battle. As Fan Miaoyu spoke, the screen of light on the sacred battle platform opened. The two of them exchanged glances and smiled as they stepped out. I've lost. Maybe he is still some distance away from being unrivaled in Heavenly Dipper in the Royal Sacred Region, but I believe that he will definitely reach that level. Fan Miaoyu smiled as she spoke to the spectators. There could only be one true unrivaled in Heavenly Dipper in the Royal Sacred Region. If the current Qin Wentian was able to obtain it, it would be impossible for Fan Miaoyu to do so. There were still other true intents that had comprehended 4 types of true intents. For such characters, the current Qin Wentian might not be able to defeat them, but he would definitely be able to do so in the future. After speaking, Fan Miaoyu walked out of the sacred battle platform. The gazes of the others were all focused on Qin Wentian. Who would have thought that Qin Wentian with a cultivation base at the 7th level of Heavenly Dipper would be able to last until the very end in this battle? Just like what Fan Miaoyu had said, the era was changing. Staring at that magnificent silhouette, there were many who were anticipating his future. There were some who were filled with anticipation. There were also those who were filled with hatred, wanting nothing more than for Qin Wentian to die. For example, those from the Grand Shang faction, the Supreme D clan, the Violet Thunder sect. All of them hoped that Qin Wentian would die on the sacred battle platform. However, all of them died in the end. Not only did Qin Wentian not die, he grew even stronger, even more dazzling than before. Qin Wentian, another supreme character, has appeared in the Battle Sword sect. The hearts of the crowd mused. During these recent years, Lin Shuai's name shook the world, followed by Lin Shuai and Ji Feixue. And now there was another Qin Wentian. How terrifying was this sect? At this moment, a surge of aura drifted over, after which, the crowd only saw a silhouette walking over from the air above their heads. This person was incomparably imposing, his eyes were like lightning, and his entire body exuded a powerful aura. His gaze swept over the crowd. His sword-like eyes seemed to be able to penetrate the hearts of others. He glanced at Qin Wentian before speaking. Those from the 9 great sects, gather the strongest Heavenly Dipper sovereigns and head to the Royal Sacred Sect 3 days from now. In addition, those from the other powers in the Royal Sacred Region, feel free to select their most outstanding disciples, and follow me to the Royal Sacred Sect. The tone of this person when speaking to the 9 great sects had a hint of command in it. As for the other sects, he allowed them to choose freely. After all, the 9 great sects were directly subordinate to the Royal Sacred Sect. But even so, the identity of this person was sufficient to cause the hearts of the crowd to tremble. Chapter 630. This person was most probably an expert from the core faction of the Royal Sacred Sect. Experts from the core faction were the true controllers of the Royal Sacred Sect. Only this core faction could control the 9 great sects and speak in such a commanding tone. However, at this moment, the hearts of the spectators were filled with shock when they heard this. The battle on the sacred battle platform had shaken the entire Royal Sacred Region, causing all the major sects to gather here. Why would the Royal Sacred Sect issue an order for all the geniuses to gather here? With regards to the hegemons of the Royal Sacred Region, the spectators didn't have much understanding of them. After the geniuses of the Royal Sacred Region entered the Royal Sacred Sect, the people of the outside world didn't know much about them. Staring at Qin Wentian and the others, they were all thinking in their hearts. If Qin Wentian and the others entered the Royal Sacred Sect, what sort of accomplishments would they have in the future? Also, in the current Royal Sacred Sect, how strong were those geniuses that once stood at the pinnacle? Qin Wentian, this heavens chosen that exuded magnificence throughout the generations in the Royal Sacred Region. If compared to the core geniuses nurtured by the Royal Sacred Sect, who would be more outstanding? This riddle, they would never know the answer. After entering the Royal Sacred Sect, even if those geniuses fought, they would only do so within the Royal Sacred Sect, and not on the public stage of the Royal Sacred Region. At this moment, the Battle Sword Sect and the other great sects all had bewildered looks on their faces. Why would the Royal Sacred Sect gather the geniuses of the various great sects? Among the people from the Battle Sword Sect, 2 sword sovereigns appeared. They were the Flame Mountain Sword Sovereign and the Desolate Mountain Sword Sovereign. The 2 of them sat in the same row but were separated by a few seats. In the middle of them, a middle-aged expert sat. This person's countenance turned extremely solemn when he heard the words of those from the Royal Sacred Sect. His brows involuntarily twitched as a hint of unhappiness flashed in his eyes. The Flame Mountain Sword Sovereign and the Desolate Mountain Sword Sovereign both turned their gazes onto him, as though they were communicating via voice transmission. "Can I ask the purpose of this trip?" an expert from the other great sects asked. "There's no need to ask. You all can decide for yourselves if you are willing to go or not." That person from the Royal Sacred Sect indifferently spoke, his tone impolite. This caused the experts from the other great sects to have expressions of contemplation on their faces. 3 days later, we will naturally bring our men over. An expert from the Violet Thunder sect spoke. After which, the other 9 great sects all expressed their intentions to head over to the Royal Sacred Sect. The Royal Sacred Sect is summoning the geniuses of the 9 great sections. It shouldn't be a bad thing. Many experts from the ancient countries mused as they made a decision in their hearts. Fine. 3 days later, I will wait for you outside the Royal Sacred Sect. That person spoke again. After which, his silhouette flickered as he soared through the air. Is there anyone else who wishes to ascend the sacred battle platform today? At this moment, a voice rang out. It was none other than the controller of the sacred battle platform. No one replied. In the battle today, Qin Wentian swept through all the heaven chosen. Fan Miaoyu and Wu Tung had similarly displayed extraordinary brilliance. If one wanted to challenge the 3 of them, most probably only those who have comprehended multiple types of true intents would be able to do so. And for such an expert who had yet to step into the celestial phenomenon realm, it was extremely rare. Junior brother Qin. At this moment Lin Shuai called out. Qin Wentian turned his gaze over only to see Lin Shuai nodding his head. After which, he walked over to Lin Shuai's side only to hear Lin Shuai speaking to the person in the middle of the 2 sword sovereigns. Junior brother Qin, this is the senior granduncle of my Battle Sword Sect in the Royal Sacred Sect. He wishes to invite you over to the Royal Sacred Sect to take a look. What do you think? Qin Wentian stared at the person in the middle as he bowed. I will naturally listen to Senior's words. After this battle, the gazes of the crowd were all fixed on him. It was unknown how many people wanted to kill him. Although his strength wasn't far from the peak of Heavenly Dipper, it was still insufficient when compared to the various great sections. Now that an elder of his sect invited him to the Royal Sacred Sect, it was clear that the sect wanted to protect him. How could he reject? Let us move out then. The middle-aged man smiled and nodded to Qin Wentian. Today when he saw Qin Wentian, it was indeed as the rumors said. Qin Wentian's magnificence was unmatched throughout the generations, and he was indeed a talent that could be nurtured. In the future, he would definitely become a peak-level expert in the Royal Sacred Region. Can I bring my friend along? Qin Wentian asked. Naturally. The middle-aged man nodded. A smile appeared on his face as he stared in the direction of Mo Qingcheng. Where was the holy maiden of the medicine sovereign valley? These two juniors were truly a match made in heaven. Qin Wentian slowly walked to the side of Mo Qingcheng. Their gazes locked as they smiled at each other. Taking a step forward, Qin Wentian held onto Mo Qingcheng's dainty hands. He could feel the coldness of Mo Qingcheng's hands as he felt a tinge of guilt in his heart. He must have made her worry for him again. The battle on the sacred battle platform was actually extremely dangerous. If it wasn't for him comprehending it at the most crucial moment, how would it have been so easy for him to kill Di Shi and Lu Lan? Qin Wentian stared at the crowd only to see a silhouette silently turning around, as though preparing to leave. Qin Wentian started as he involuntarily called out, "Qing'er." That silhouette halted her steps and slowly turned around, only to see Qin Wentian holding Mo Qingcheng's hand as they walked over. "What's the matter?" Qin Wentian asked. "I'll return to the battle sword sect first." Qing'er hugged little rascal in her arms as she spoke in a low voice. Qin Wentian stared at the pair of eyes that were exposed to the world, feeling a sense of unbearable pain in his heart. He didn't know where this feeling came from. Back then when he met Qing'er told him that he no longer needed her. At that time, Qin Wentian thought that she would leave, causing an indescribable sense of disappointment in Qin Wentian's heart. Only when Qing'er said that she wouldn't leave did he feel better. After that, Qing'er followed him here, but now she actually wanted to leave. However, right now, Qin Wentian was holding onto Qing'er's hand, yet he didn't know how to persuade Qing'er to stay. "I'm leaving." Qing'er turned and spoke in a melodious voice. "Qing'er." At this moment, a gentle voice drifted over. Qing'er halted her steps once again as she turned to look at Mo Qingcheng. Mo Qingcheng walked up to her and smiled sweetly. "Qing'er, let's go together." "Just nice. I don't have a companion, can you accompany me?" Qing'er's clear eyes flashed with a hint of astonishment. She stared at Mo Qingcheng only to see Mo Qingcheng's eyes flickering with sincerity. Qing'er actually didn't know how to reject. She could only reply, "Sure." "Thank you, Qing'er." Mo Qingcheng took a step forward, her eyes filled with gratitude. She knew that everything Qing'er had done for Qin Wentian was something she had never done before. Both of them were women, but maybe Mo Qingcheng's understanding of Qing'er was even deeper compared to Qin Wentian's. The cold Qing'er, at this moment, actually seemed to be avoiding eye contact, as though there were traces of panic in her beautiful eyes. "Two fairies." Little rascal reverted back to his original form as he spoke in a baby-like voice. Stretching out his paws, he tore away Qing'er's veil. At this moment, the spectators were all dumbfounded. Only now did they understand how appropriate the two fairies the little demonic beast spoke of were. Mo Qingcheng was already breathtaking enough, but this veiled maiden was actually so beautiful as well. She, who was as cold as ice, was akin to a pure and flawless snow lotus on an ice mountain, without a single trace of dirt on her. "How beautiful!" Many people exclaimed in their hearts. Yet another beauty on the same level as Mo Qingcheng and Lin Xian. Even Lin Xian was stunned as a look of astonishment appeared on her face. After which, a smile flickered in her eyes. That fellow was truly powerful. However, at this moment, the ones who were the most shocked were none other than Wang Yunfei, Xinjing, Rong Yan, Yu Yu and the others. Xinjing and Rong Yan treated Qing'er and Qin Wentian like they were apprentices, kicking them to Yu Yu. Not only did they not look at Qin Wentian in the eye, they also didn't look at this maiden. However, if Xinjing were to stand beside this maiden, her radiance would pale in comparison. Qing'er slapped little rascal's head back, coldly staring at it, causing little rascal to whimper. After which, the three of them returned to the battle sword sect and soared into the air, departing the area. "Let's go." Fan Miaoyu Wu Tung, the experts from the various ancient sects. Countless people stared at the silhouette of Qin Wentian as they sighed in their hearts. The royal sacred sect, the hegemon of an era, had a majestic palace that towered into the heavens. At the entrance of the sect, there was a majestic palace that towered into the heavens. At the entrance of the sect, there was a stairway that ascended into the heavens. It was over 100 feet tall, ascending step by step, entering the royal sacred sect. Qin Wentian and the others headed in a certain direction, and entered a majestic palace. This was none other than the palace where the Battle Sword faction was located. Just the palace complex where this bloodline was located was already extremely majestic. Wentian, come with me. That senior from the Battle Sword sect smiled at Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian nodded his head, bringing Mo Qingqing and Qinger with him as they advanced forward. Not long after, they arrived at a location where an old man stood with his hands clasped behind his back, staring at Qin Wentian with a teasing look in his eyes. That smile gave Qin Wentian a sense of shamelessness. Qin Wentian and Qinger were both stunned. They had actually met this old man before. Back then in Xianqing City, Qin Wentian and Qinger were chased by the various major powers. There, they met a strange old man who wanted to take Qin Wentian and Qinger as his disciples, only to be rejected by them. Little rascal, you still won't be able to escape from my palms. That old man stared at Qin Wentian as a shameless smile appeared on his face. Old man, don't tell me you are the founder of the Battle Sword sect? Qin Wentian cursed in a low voice. He suddenly understood some things. Back then when his senior brother Lin Shuai appeared in Xianqing City, it was rumored that it was an order from the upper echelons of the Battle Sword sect. Now that he saw this old man, how could Qin Wentian not understand what had happened back then? The people behind were all sweating profusely. They were all stunned speechless by a single sentence from Qin Wentian. They were the leaders of the Battle Sword sect. Yet Qin Wentian actually referred to them as old man. The old man was also stunned. He blew on his beard as he glared at Qin Wentian. Little brat, you have guts? Old man, tell me the purpose of the Royal Sacred Sect this time around. Qin Wentian didn't give any face to the old man at all. At the very end, he discovered that he was tricked by this old man when he joined the Battle Sword sect. How could he allow this old fellow to be so complacent? The old man stared at Qin Wentian, his eyes widened to the extreme. After which he cursed in a low voice. Consider yourself ruthless. This time around, the Royal Sacred Sect has gathered the geniuses of the various powers because there's an immortal palace that they need you all to barge into. It's extremely dangerous to enter the immortal palace, and the Royal Sacred Sect has already explored it for many years. This time around, they've prepared many terrifying Heavenly Dipper sovereigns. You have to be careful not to fall into a trap and never underestimate the strength of those geniuses. Immortal Palace? Qin Wentian's eyes flashed with sharpness. Yes, Immortal Palace. The Vermilion Bird Immortal Palace should be something left behind by an extremely terrifying expert. Even the sect leader of the Royal Sacred Sect couldn't force his way in. From this, you can imagine how powerful the master of the Immortal Palace was. As the sound of the old man's voice faded, Qin Wentian's heart pounded violently. Vermilion Bird Immortal Palace. Chapter 631. How could Qin Wentian forget the Vermilion Bird Immortal Palace? His other incarnation, Ditian, was still in the royal tomb of Grand Xia. Within the royal tomb, Ditian had obtained the inheritance of the Xia Emperor, the founder of Grand Xia. What the Xia Emperor gave him the most was the key to the Vermilion Bird Immortal Palace. How ancient was the Xia Emperor? Back then, he barged into the Vermilion Bird Immortal Palace. From this, one could very well imagine how many years this immortal palace had existed for. He remembered that the Xia Emperor told Ditian that the Great Dream Immortal Art originated from the Vermilion Bird Immortal Palace, and there were many other treasures there. The Xia Emperor had yet to truly reach the core of the Vermilion Bird Immortal Palace, and had yet to fully comprehend its secrets. Maybe, he was just an adventurer who had entered the Vermilion Bird Immortal Palace. This was also the reason why the Vermilion Bird was the totem of Grand Xia. And now, Qin Wentian actually knew that the Royal Sacred Sect had gathered the geniuses of the 9 great sects and the Royal Sacred Region, just for the sake of entering the Vermilion Bird Immortal Palace. Seems like Ditian has to leave the royal tomb. Qin Wentian's eyes flashed with sharpness. Since they wanted to enter the Vermilion Bird Immortal Palace, Ditian had a key in his hands. Naturally, he had to send it over. Although he didn't know if it would be of any use, it was better to be prepared. According to the Xia Emperor, that key was something even the Royal Sacred Region might not have. Why? You have an idea? The old man smiled as he stared at the gleam in Qin Wentian's eyes. Will the royal sacred sect use us as cannon fodder? Qin Wentian asked. I don't know about that, but I can't rule out such a possibility. The eyes of the old man similarly flashed with a dazzling light. The one who called for this gathering was someone from the core faction of the royal sacred sect. This faction was the leader of the royal sacred sect, commanding the entire royal sacred region. They were extremely stubborn in their pursuit of strength, and he already knew that there were a few extremely terrifying characters at the Heavenly Dipper realm in the royal sacred sect. As for what they were thinking in their hearts, he could only guess and had no way of knowing the truth. When Qin Wentian heard this, he understood that the old man was already reminding him that this possibility could not be ruled out. As for who would be the cannon fodder, it would depend on how much confidence one had. Are these two your girlfriends? The old man cast a glance at Mo Qingqing and Qing, before shifting his gaze to Qin Wentian with a sneaky smile on his face. No matter how one looked at it, that smile was extremely wretched. The gazes of Mo Qingqing and Qing'er landed on Qin Wentian at the same time. Qin Wentian silently cursed the old bastard in front of him. After which, he only heard little rascal replying in his baby-like voice, "Mhm, both are mine." Bang! Qing'er slapped little rascal again. This time around, little rascal was directly slammed onto the ground as it let out whimpering sounds. It stared at Qing'er with an aggrieved expression. You bullied me. In the future, Wentian, after you marry her, you will help me bully her. Qin Wentian's face was filled with black lines. Staring at the cold gaze of Qing'er, he couldn't help but shiver. He silently cursed in his heart that little rascal would definitely be taught a lesson when he returned. Now, are you interested in becoming my disciple? The old man turned to Qing'er as he asked. Nope. Qing'er replied in a cold voice, causing the old man to be dumbfounded. Staring at the juniors behind them, he couldn't help but sweat profusely in his heart. Today, his face had been completely thrown away by these two brats. This lord was only joking with you. Yes, joking. The old man coughed as he spoke with a straight face. Okay, let's go. With your measly talent, I can't even be bothered to guide you. Oh. Qin Wentian wasn't polite at all as he turned and departed. The others were still staring at him, as though they understood what he meant. Why are you guys still not scramming? The old man cursed in rage. A moment later, the group of them all fled with their tails between their legs. Their speed was truly extremely fast. 3 days passed very quickly. The hegemon of the Royal Sacred Region, the Royal Sacred Sect, welcomed many peak-level Heavenly Dipper sovereigns. There were young men among them, as well as middle-aged men over 100 years of age. They came from the various major powers and were currently gathered in the Royal Sacred Sect. Although many of the major powers didn't know what the Royal Sacred Sect was doing, they still didn't want to miss out on this opportunity. It was extremely rare for the Royal Sacred Sect to issue such a summons. Since they wanted to gather the experts of the major powers, there must be something extremely important that they didn't want to miss out on. After entering the entrance of the Royal Sacred Sect, they ascended the flight of stairs leading to the territory of the core faction. In a training ground, there were many experts from the various major powers gathered here. Qin Wentian also arrived. His perception swept over, and he actually felt a faint pressure. These people might not be as famous as the era-suppressing geniuses, but the auras they exuded were all at the peak of Heavenly Dipper. Not only that, these people must have comprehended at least one true intent of the mandate. Among the crowd, Qin Wentian saw Fan Miaoyu and Wu Teng. Qin Wentian, you've arrived as well. Wu Teng and Fan Miaoyu walked towards Qin Wentian with smiles on their faces. Although they were opponents on the sacred battle platform and were frenziedly fighting against each other, in truth, they had a mutual respect for each other. This was especially so for Qin Wentian. Such an opponent was truly worthy of respect. Qin Wentian nodded his head and smiled. The gazes of several people turned over, all of them staring at Qin Wentian. In fact, there were even some who started whispering in a low voice, not bothering to hide anything. Recently, Qin Wentian was in the limelight. At the Heavenly Dipper realm, there was no one else in the entire Royal Sacred Region who was more famous than him. Ranked first in the Immortal Martial realm, killing a prince of Granshang, and an elder of the royal sacred sect died because of him. 3 days ago, he fought against so many outstanding heroes and obtained the position of the top ranker, slaying the era-suppressing genius Di Shi. The gazes of the crowd that stared at Qin Wentian were filled with coldness. For example, the heavens chosen from the Granshang faction, the experts from the Violet Thunder sect. Other than that, because Qin Wentian caused the death of an elder of the royal sacred sect, in addition to his fame, many disciples of the royal sacred sect felt a trace of unhappiness towards Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian. At this moment, a voice drifted over. Qin Wentian turned his gaze over. It was none other than the imposing figure who appeared on the sacred battle platform that day. He spoke to Qin Wentian, "Come with me." After speaking, he turned and departed. Qin Wentian walked out of the crowd and followed behind that person. Upon seeing that person stopping and looking at him, Qin Wentian asked, "Senior, do you have any instructions for me? I'm someone from the core faction of the royal sacred sect. I'm sure you should be clear about this. I wish to invite you to join my faction." That person spoke to Qin Wentian, officially extending an invitation to Qin Wentian. Before this, they had already invited Hua Taishu. As for why they didn't invite Qin Wentian, it was because they cared about the feelings of the Granshang faction. But after that, Qin Wentian's outstanding performance on the sacred battle platform, they decided to officially recruit Qin Wentian. "Senior, if I choose to join the royal sacred sect and cultivate together with the seniors of the battle sword sect, wouldn't that be the same?" Qin Wentian probed. Although he knew he was tricked by that old fellow, Qin Wentian was still grateful to him. Now that he knew the origin of his connection with the battle sword sect, Qin Wentian had the thought of joining the battle sword faction. Hence he asked this question. "It's different." The person before him shook his head. "If you join us, you will naturally belong to the core faction. Because of this, many people in the Granshang Empire might be unhappy. That's not good. We can suppress it and compensate them appropriately. This matter can end here. In addition, if you join our faction, there would be benefits for you as well." This person revealed some information, but he didn't explain everything clearly. However, they were willing to forsake the death of an elder in order to recruit Qin Wentian. From this, one could see how highly they regarded Qin Wentian. This was something Qin Wentian was very clear of. However, asking him to directly join the core faction? No matter how he looked at it, Qin Wentian felt that it was somewhat unfair. Although they were both from the royal sacred sect, there was still a difference. He originated from the battle sword sect. If he joined the core faction, where would the battle sword sect be placed? "Senior, this junior still wishes to seriously consider this." Qin Wentian had already indirectly rejected the offer. The other party was stunned for a moment before he continued. "We will be moving out very soon. Think carefully, this matter is extremely important." Qin Wentian muttered to himself for a moment before he inclined his head and stared at the other party. "I'm sorry, I still wish to temporarily remain in the battle sword sect to cultivate." Such an answer evidently caused the other party to be taken aback. After a moment he nodded his head lightly. "Okay, you can return. Junior will take my leave." Qin Wentian couldn't tell whether the other party was happy or angry. The eyes of this person were calm, with no fluctuations of emotions at all. This person was definitely someone even more terrifying compared to the elder from the royal sacred sect. Qin Wentian walked towards the crowd as the gazes of the crowd were still on him. Someone spoke in a low voice. This man is none other than Qin Wentian, the top ranker of the immortal martial realm, and is known as Unrivaled in Heavenly Dipper. Unrivaled in Heavenly Dipper? A female from the royal sacred sect glanced at Qin Wentian as she emotionlessly spoke. "Those people in the outside world don't know the immensity of the heavens and earth. Do they know what Unrivaled in Heavenly Dipper is? Nothing but a joke." "That's right, even if it's the immortal martial realm, that's because we didn't participate," another person added in a low voice. Although the voices of these people were low, they didn't intentionally mask it. Qin Wentian could naturally hear them. The gazes they used to stare at Qin Wentian were filled with disdain, doubt, and naturally, there were also some that had expressions of interest on their faces. Chapter 632. The Royal Sacred Sect was the absolute hegemon of the Royal Sacred Region. The disciples of the Royal Sacred Sect were all heaven's chosen of the various powers, and these people before them were all geniuses of the Royal Sacred Sect. How dazzling was their radiance! Which one of them wasn't a heaven's chosen? For these people chosen this time around, not a single one of them wasn't a character at the peak of Heavenly Dipper. All of them had comprehended a true intent of their mandates, and had extremely high combat prowess. After they joined the Royal Sacred Sect, it was very rare for them to be famous in the outside world. But who would dare to say that these heavens chosen of the Royal Sacred Sect were weak? If any one of them walked out, although they wouldn't be as dazzling as the 8 era-suppressing geniuses, they wouldn't be too far off. Under such circumstances, a heavens chosen from the outside world appeared before them. Not only that, this person was very young and his fame was so great that no one in the Royal Sacred Region knew of him. An elder of the Royal Sacred Sect even died, because of him. Under such circumstances, it was impossible for these people to have a favorable impression of Qin Wentian. Would they feel that they were inferior to Qin Wentian? Qin Wentian swept his gaze over the crowd. His countenance was extremely calm as he walked past them. These heavens chosen were all separated into different camps. They should be from the various major powers. Qin Wentian. At this moment, a voice drifted over. Qin Wentian halted his steps as he stared at the person who spoke. It was a female with a slender figure. Her legs exuded a sense of elasticity and strength. Her beautiful eyes stared at Qin Wentian as she crossed her arms in front of her chest. A smile could be seen in her eyes as she spoke. I heard that you are very powerful. On the sacred battle platform, you comprehended 2 true intents in a single day and defeated someone at the 9th level of Heavenly Dipper with a cultivation base at the 7th level. Qin Wentian calmly stared at her. He didn't reply, only to see that the female had a teasing smile on her face. Maybe you are really strong, but those 9th level Heavenly Dipper sovereigns who were defeated by you, in my opinion, don't even have the qualifications to be called heaven's chosen, let alone an era-suppressing genius. What a joke. Over here, there are many disciples of my Royal Sacred Sect who have comprehended 2, 3, or even 4 true intents. If you were to face them, what are your chances of victory? Not even 10%. You will definitely lose. The smile on the young woman's face grew even colder. Qin Wentian frowned. Fan Miaoyu was among the crowd, and this young woman's words weren't only meant to provoke him. It was also meant to humiliate Fan Miaoyu. Qin Wentian still didn't say anything. He saw 4 to 5 people appearing around the young woman. Their gazes were extremely cold when they stared at Qin Wentian. Among these people, there were a few who exuded an aura of nobility, as though they were from royalty. They were none other than experts from the Grand Shang faction. That elder who died because of Qin Wentian was their elder. Qin Wentian could vaguely guess this based on the other party's temperament. And then, Qin Wentian finally opened his mouth and said coldly, "Put away your condescending eyes. There are many people here that you need to look up to." When the female saw the cold light in Qin Wentian's eyes, her gaze grew even colder as she exuded a cold intent. Your current cultivation base is at the 9th level of Heavenly Dipper. Not bad. How many true intents have you comprehended? Qin Wentian casually asked, his tone devoid of any emotions. This caused the young woman to glance at him in bewilderment before she replied arrogantly, 3. Oh. Qin Wentian nodded his head. He then asked again, when you were at the 7th level of Heavenly Dipper, how many true intents did you comprehend? The young woman's gaze stiffened, as though she understood Qin Wentian's meaning. She coldly laughed. Comprehending true intents depends on luck and fortune. It doesn't mean that whoever comprehended it earlier would be stronger. I see. Qin Wentian nodded his head. After which, he continued walking forward as a leisurely voice drifted out from his mouth. When our cultivation bases were the same, maybe I could slap you to death with a single palm. At that time, are you going to tell me that it doesn't mean that whoever comprehended it earlier would be stronger? After speaking, Qin Wentian shook his head. And when the young woman heard his words, her eyes instantly flashed with killing intent as she stared fixedly at Qin Wentian. Senior sister, It's just a vile character intoxicated by success. There's no need to lower yourself to his level. A young man beside her gently smiled. However, his words weren't as scholarly as his appearance. The young woman nodded her head lightly when she heard his words, but she still coldly swept a glance at Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian walked towards Fan Miaoyu and Wu Tung as he nodded to them. Do you want to form a group? There are 2 senior brothers of my battle sword sect that are from the royal sacred sect over there. After speaking, Qin Wentian pointed in a certain direction. There were 2 heaven chosen from the battle sword faction there. Sure. Fan Miaoyu smiled and nodded. Wu Ting naturally wouldn't mind as well. They could also tell that the people here were grouped into groups of 3 to 5, and were separated into different factions. Most probably, the royal sacred sect was split into the core faction, the 9 great sects, and the 2 majestic empires. The core faction was the core of the royal sacred sect, while the other factions competed against each other. The survival of the fittest. At this moment, from afar, several people walked over. There were a total of 7 of them, and they were none other than the expert who invited Qin Wentian to join the royal sacred sect. These 7 people gave Qin Wentian a feeling that they were all extraordinary. Their cultivation bases were all at the 8th or 9th level of Heavenly Dipper, and their spirit, chi and spirit were extremely refined. Their eyes that were as calm as water occasionally gleamed with a light that could stir the souls of those who looked at them. Hua Taishu. Qin Wentian saw a familiar silhouette among the 7. It was none other than Hua Taishu, who was invited by the royal sacred sect to join the core faction. In the immortal martial realm, he, Hua Taishu, and Gu Lufeng were the only 3 who managed to traverse all the stone monuments. Most probably, their harvests were bountiful, and Hua Taishu should have already comprehended the true intent of his mandate. If not, he wouldn't have appeared here. The royal sacred sect summoned all of you here, because they want to bring you to a special place. This place is extremely dangerous, but there are also great opportunities hidden within. From today onwards, all of you will listen to the commands of Xia Sheng. The 7 of them will teach you what to do. Do you understand? That expert who invited Qin Wentian spoke to the others, causing Qin Wentian to understand that what the other party said earlier was different. Naturally, it was different. Those from the core faction could actually command these people. They were the true core members of the royal sacred sect. This made Qin Wentian, who knew of the Vermilion Bird Immortal Palace, feel that if they were to enter, everything would be for the benefit of these 7 people. If he had nodded his head earlier, he would be a member of the core faction, and the treatment he would receive would be different. However, these people in front of him were all arrogant individuals. Not a single one of them was a good person. If Qin Wentian wanted to order them around, he would have to be extremely powerful. Especially Xia Sheng. He should be someone who had comprehended 4 types of true intents of the mandate path. He is Xia Sheng. At this moment, Qin Wentian heard Fan Miaoyu, who was beside him, exclaiming in a low voice. Qin Wentian turned to her and transmitted his voice. You know of him? Naturally, back then Xia Sheng's fame was extremely great. He was even more famous than Gu Lufeng. It's just that he joined the royal sacred sect too early, hence we don't hear much news about him. Right now he actually hasn't broken through to celestial phenomenon yet. In that case, his current strength must be extremely terrifying. Fan Miaoyu replied. Qin Wentian nodded his head lightly. Xia Sheng was very powerful, this was for sure. If not, how could he become the leader of this group of people? Understood. We will naturally listen to the commands of senior brother Xia Sheng. The people from the various sects all spoke. With regards to the core faction, they still maintained a level of respect. Xia Sheng was extremely powerful, it was only natural for him to be their leader. Since this is the case, all of you should prepare yourselves. Let's move out now. That expert spoke as everyone nodded their heads. After which, the group of people soared into the air, directly departing from the royal sacred sect. Xia Sheng and the rest of the core faction had a total of 7 disciples, while the number of disciples from the other factions varied. In total, there were over 100 people, and each faction would have a core character. For example, the faction from the Grand Shang faction also had a leader. The leader was a white-haired young man who gave off a strange feeling. It was impossible to tell his age. Earlier, that female who wanted to humiliate Qin Wentian was quietly standing beside him. Other than this, there were also people like Fan Miaoyu and Wu Teng who had no connection with any of the other factions. They directly joined a power or formed their own faction. The Battle Sword faction had the least people. If one didn't include Fan Miaoyu and Wu Teng, there were only 3. Qin Wentian and 2 other disciples from the Battle Sword faction, Qin and Siko. Qin exuded a scholarly aura, exuding an extraordinary aura. His cultivation base was at the 9th level of Heavenly Dipper. Siko's aura was different, he exuded a faint evil aura, giving off a demonic feeling. When the 2 of them walked together, it didn't seem like they were from the same sect. With a single glance, one could tell that they were people with their own personalities. Bai Wang's strength is very strong, he's at the peak of Heavenly Dipper, and has comprehended 4 types of true intents. Tu Lung is the leader of the Violet Thunder sect, his strength is close to Bai Wang's. You have to be careful of these 2. Qin didn't interact too much with Qin Wentian. He only silently reminded Qin Wentian that Bai Wang was none other than the white-haired young man from the Violet Thunder sect. Tu Lung was a short but muscular man. He stood in the middle of the group from the Violet Thunder sect, but he was definitely one of the core characters. The others respectfully followed behind him. Qin Wentian silently noted this down. The strength of these people were truly stronger than him. It wasn't the frightening words spoken by the leader of the Battle Sword faction. The leaders of each faction were all extremely terrifying. They traveled for 2 days before they arrived at their destination. It was actually located at the border of the Royal Sacred Region, in the illusionary mountain range near the Grand Zhou Empire. That expert from the Royal Sacred Sect had a compass in his hand, and he led them into the illusionary mountain range, finding the Vermilion Bird Immortal Palace. Evidently, he had already decided on the location. The mountain range was akin to a crouching dragon, meandering across the land. Above the misty skies, a boundlessly vast immortal palace could be seen floating there. Qin Wentian had seen this immortal palace before in the map given to him by the Xia Emperor. But now that he was here, he actually discovered that this immortal palace was so vast that he couldn't see the end of it. It was like an immortal palace that floated here, floating in the air. The shock in the hearts of everyone was indescribable with words. What is this place? Fan Miaoyu's heart pounded. Such a gigantic floating immortal palace. It was simply impossible to see the end of it. It was simply hard to imagine what sort of character would be able to construct such a palace. Not only for Fan Miaoyu. Everyone felt their souls trembling as they inclined their heads and stared at the gigantic immortal palace. Chapter 633. That expert from the Royal Sacred Sect who led them here pointed to the immortal palace in front of them as he stated. This immortal palace was created by a supreme existence. As for how strong that existence is, I'm not sure, but I can tell you for sure that the master of this immortal palace is extremely powerful. So powerful that it surpasses all of your knowledge. In fact, it even surpasses my knowledge. There are even immortal arts and immortal weapons within. There's no need to doubt this point. Not only that, there are many immortal arts and immortal weapons inside. Generation after generation, there have been too many people from my Royal Sacred Sect who have entered. The final conclusion we obtained was that celestial phenomenon ascendants would definitely die if they entered. And for those who have the highest chance of success, they are people like you all at the peak of Heavenly Dipper, and have comprehended a true intent of mandates. This is why I allowed you all to come here. This place is extremely dangerous, and I've already informed Xiaosheng and the others about everything. They are the clearest about the situation here. Hence you all have to listen to Xiaosheng's commands. If Xiaosheng dies, listen to Zaiqiu's commands. The 7 of them are the core of your group, and for those who disobey, even if they manage to survive, they will be executed. This person's expression was solemn. It was obvious that he was well prepared every time he entered the Celestial Palace, including this time. He had prepared for a long time before taking the risk to enter the Celestial Palace again. When the crowd heard his words, they were shocked. There were actually celestial arts and celestial weapons in there. They had already obtained the approval. In that case, How powerful would the master of this celestial palace be? It was unimaginable. Qin Wentian also seemed to have realized that the vermilion bird immortal palace that the Xia Emperor spoke of might be even more mysterious and terrifying than he had imagined. And back then when the Xia Emperor coincidentally entered the immortal palace, his cultivation base was at the peak of Heavenly Dipper. He didn't know that celestial phenomenon ascendants couldn't enter, or else he would have definitely reminded him. Okay, you guys can enter now. Xia Sheng will guide you all. If there's really an immortal art or immortal weapon, hand it over to us when you exit. I swear that the Royal Sacred Sect will not mistreat you all. You guys can also cultivate immortal arts and at the same time, remember to explore more of the secrets within and report back to us when you exit. That person spoke again. Xia Sheng stood in front of the crowd. He turned and stared at them. Follow me closely. This immortal palace is a world of its own, and no one knows all the secrets within. If you take a single wrong step, you might all die inside. Let's go. Saint Xia's gaze swept over everyone. His reserved eyes suddenly erupted with a light that caused one's heart to palpitate, containing a terrifying majesty. As soon as he finished speaking, he took the lead and walked towards the entrance of the fairy palace. Let's go. Qin spoke. Qin Wentian and the rest walked forward. Over 100 of them stepped onto the stairs leading to the entrance of the immortal palace. Step by step, they walked inside. At this moment, they felt that they were extremely insignificant in front of this majestic immortal palace. Void Cloud, GMO, the two of you move forward and pay attention to the divine inscriptions. Walking into the entrance of the immortal palace, there was a passageway that was filled with dense fog. It was as if immortal qi pervaded the air, and even perception was blocked, unable to extend too far. Other than the dense fog, there's also a divine inscription formation at the entrance. The grade of the formation isn't too high and isn't too difficult to break through, but once it's activated, the killing intent it exudes is sufficient to annihilate us. Hence, we mustn't take a single step recklessly. Void Cloud and Loneliness were two divine inscriptionists that were specially chosen to decipher the divine inscriptions. At this moment, they explained to the crowd. The crowd walked into the mist and discovered that their perception was restricted. Their vision was limited to a radius of 10 meters. There's a golden passageway in the tomb of the Xia Emperor. If one can't decipher the divine inscriptions, they wouldn't be able to obtain the key. Could it be because of this passageway? Qin Wentian mused. His attainments in the Tao of divine inscriptions were very high. He naturally could tell that there were many divine inscriptions inscribed on the ground. It was as though every single one of them was an independent divine inscription. Void Cloud and Loneliness were indeed very powerful. Their attainments in the Tao of divine inscriptions were extremely high. Evidently, they were experts handpicked by the Royal Sacred Sect. Although the speed at which they led the way was very slow, they were also very stable. There was no room for mistakes to occur. Qin Wentian had also been paying attention to the divine inscriptions. At the end of the passageway, he discovered that the divine inscriptions in the passageway weren't independent, but rather they were all interconnected. As long as one of them was activated, it would trigger a chain reaction, and the consequences would be extremely terrifying. There were no mistakes at all. After walking for a total of 3 days, they finally left the boundary of the divine inscriptions. And in the outside world, Ditian had arrived. In the Hallucination Mountain Range, it was very hard for outsiders to determine their direction. Even for experts of the Royal Sacred Sect, they had to rely on compass treasures to determine their direction. However, Ditian didn't need one, because since Qin Wentian was here, he would naturally be able to sense it. The expert from the Royal Sacred Region couldn't help but to feel bewildered when he saw Ditian. A terrifying aura bore down on Ditian as he asked, "Who are you?" "Junior is from the Granzhou Empire. I came here to explore the Hallucination Mountain Range. I came here by chance. I hope Senior won't blame me," Ditian politely replied. Yet his gaze was fixed on the Vermilion Bird Immortal Palace as an expression of shock appeared on his face, as though this was the first time he saw it. "You want to enter?" That expert from the Royal Sacred Region coldly laughed. If a 7th-level Heavenly Dipper sovereign wanted to enter, only death would await him. This palace belongs to Senior. If it belongs to Senior, Junior naturally wouldn't dare to disturb you. Di Tian bowed. Don't worry, if you can enter, just do so. But don't blame me for not warning you. This place is extremely dangerous. If you enter, you will die for sure. That person emotionlessly spoke. Di Tian gritted his teeth as an expression of struggle appeared on his face. However, he still replied, Junior still wants to give it a try. Fine, go ahead then. That person casually waved his hands. Di Tian bowed. Many thanks, Senior. After speaking, Di Tian lifted his feet and stepped inside, beginning to unravel the divine inscriptions. Reckless fool. The expert outside spoke in disdain. And at this moment, Qin Wentian and the others had already arrived at another location. It was another passageway, but this time, there was no mist or divine inscriptions. However, there was a formless energy circulating within the passageway, extremely terrifying to the extreme. Xiaosheng glanced at everyone. Everyone was present. He then spoke. For the next passageway, you have to rely on yourself to pass it. Others won't be able to help you. The flowing light within the passageway will attack your will. You guys have to be extremely careful. After passing through this passageway, you will be able to enter the Immortal Palace. Everyone nodded and stepped inside, one after another. Be careful. Qin Wentian spoke in a low voice. Fan Miaoyu and Wu Ting nodded as they replied, You too. At the instant he stepped into the passageway, Qin Wentian felt a formless energy directly gushing into his mind. It was like a formless attack, directly wanting to crush his will. Boom boom. Qin Wentian's countenance instantly paled as he groaned in agony. Receiving such a sudden impact, no one would feel good. He felt as though his head was about to explode. Someone clutched his head with both his hands as an expression of agony appeared on his face. There were even some who couldn't endure it and howled in pain. What a terrifying energy! Qin Wentian's countenance was extremely unsightly to behold. He gritted his teeth and continued walking forward. He couldn't increase his speed, it was simply too painful. But right now he could only grit his teeth and endure. Boom! A beam of violet light brushed past his body. Qin Wentian only felt a wave of destructive lightning energy erupting forth in his sea of consciousness. Pooh! Accompanied by a groan of misery, Qin Wentian coughed out a mouthful of blood as his countenance turned as white as paper. It's actually so terrifying to such an extent. What sort of existence is the master of this immortal palace exactly? Qin Wentian mused. Xiaosheng and the rest of the 7 walked in front. Although they were in pain, their steps were resolute. They were the same as Qin Wentian. They came prepared and wouldn't waver at all. I can't wait any longer. If I delay here, the attacks won't stop. This is simply courting death. Qin Wentian mused as he continued walking forward. In fact, he even quickened his pace. The lightning unceasingly gushed into his sea of consciousness, erupting forth with destructive might, wanting to completely crush him. Qin Wentian and the rest were all heaven's chosen of the royal sacred region. They were all relying on their powerful wills to persist. However, the people behind were already unable to see the shadows of those walking in front. The distance between them and the others was gradually widening. What is this? Qin Wentian stared at the flowing light ahead. It was actually a blood-colored lightning bolt, causing one's heart to tremble in fear. Drawing in a deep breath, Qin Wentian continued rushing forward, stepping into the blood-colored lightning bolt. The lightning bolts clung to his body, and Qin Wentian's sea of consciousness transformed into a sea of blood. Towering bolts of lightning rained down, causing the sea of blood to churn and churn violently. It was simply too terrifying. I can't stop. Qin Wentian had already been walking in this passageway for 2 days. His entire person was much more haggard than before. This passageway was like a bottomless pit. It was simply too torturous. Qin Wentian's blood surged. His eyes gleamed with an incomparably sharp light, as though he could see through the void. What others could accomplish, how could he, Qin Wentian, be obstructed? Didn't the Xia Emperor also accomplish this back then? As he thought of this, his will grew even more resolute as he continued walking forward. This time another 5 days passed. Naturally, Qin Wentian himself already couldn't feel the flow of time. These 7 days felt as long as a lifetime. He was fighting for survival at every single moment. Such torment could truly cause one to despair, causing one to want to give up. Qin Wentian's steps were extremely fatigued, but the light that flickered in his eyes was as breathtaking as ever. What made one feel even more despair was that this was only the beginning. Qin Wentian continued on this path for another month. When he exited the passageway, he arrived at a boundlessly vast world. His entire person collapsed onto the ground, his eyes closed. Right now, he only wanted to have a good sleep. After a long time, Qin Wentian finally opened his eyes and stared at this boundlessly vast world. In this boundlessly vast world, many resplendent lights could be seen floating about. Each and every beam of light was so bright that it could pierce the eyes of those looking at it. For example, one of the beams of light was actually a sword. This sword hung upside down in the air, its radiance illuminating the heavens and earth. Below the sword there was actually a tomb without a tombstone. Or perhaps, one of the beams of light was actually an ancient scripture, floating in the air. Below the scripture, there was also a tomb without a tombstone. Qin Wentian's body trembled. This was a trembling from the depths of his soul. This entire boundlessly vast world was filled with such light, such tombstones. In that case, what sort of existences were buried in these tombstones? This so-called vermilion bird immortal palace, buried immortals? Rumble! From afar, a supreme might gushed over, causing the skies to change color. It was as though there was a supreme expert here. Qin Wentian only felt the entire space trembling. After which, a thunderous voice boomed out. "Let me out!" An angry roar shook the heavens and earth. After which, numerous towering auras engulfed this entire space, all of them coming from afar. Each of these auras was powerful enough to cause Qin Wentian to tremble. Finally, someone else is here. Another thunderous roar rang out. Not only Qin Wentian, but everyone else who arrived here through the passageway felt their hearts trembling. Even Xiaosheng, who already knew the situation here, was trembling from the impact. Chapter 634. Xiaosheng, Saiqiu, Qin, Saiku, Baiwang, Tulung, as well as the leaders of the various factions had all arrived. Their wills withstood the incomparably terrifying pressure. These were the elites carefully selected by the royal sacred region. Regardless of combat prowess or will, they were all extremely strong. Other than these leaders, there were still quite a few others. Xiaosheng, can you tell us now? What is this place exactly? Those floating divine weapons in ancient tome, are they really immortal weapons and immortal arts? Bai Wang's white hair fluttered in the wind as he asked Xiaosheng. I can't say that all of them are, but many of them are immortal weapons and immortal arts. Xiaosheng's voice caused the hearts of everyone to tremble. There were actually many immortal weapons and immortal arts. However, these immortal weapons and immortal arts cannot be touched recklessly. The stronger they are, the more immortal weapons and immortal arts must not be touched. These immortal weapons and immortal arts are all suppressing the immortal tomb. If you touch them, the immortal tomb will be broken open and experts will come out. Are you joking? There are still people in the immortal tomb? What are we doing here? Courting death? Tulung's personality was extremely violent. His eyes flickered with a blood-red light, as though he was itching to make a move. The people in the immortal tomb all have their cultivation bases sealed. Xiaosheng drew in a deep breath as a terrifying light flashed in his eyes. Upon hearing his words, everyone was stunned. Immortal tomb? Immortal ceiling? Who could be so terrifying? What level is the seal at? Qin asked. I have no idea. Xiaosheng shook his head. All of you listen carefully. You are not allowed to use 5th-ranked divine weapons or treasures similar to them. The moment you use them, those experts who come out from the tomb will have their cultivation bases unsealed to the peak of celestial phenomenon. At that time, all of us will die. As long as we don't use them, the seal will suppress their cultivation bases to the peak of Heavenly Dipper. How can this be possible? The seal will be adjusted according to our cultivation bases? Is this the reason why peak-level Heavenly Dipper sovereigns are the most suitable to enter? Someone asked. Yes, I can clearly tell all of you that even a peak-stage Heavenly Dipper sovereign can easily kill me. But if a celestial phenomenon ascendant entered, their cultivation bases would be suppressed to the peak of celestial phenomenon. In that case, there wouldn't be any ascendants in our royal sacred region who have the strength to contend against them. For those peak stage celestial phenomenon ascendants who entered before, the number of them that entered were all annihilated. Xiaosheng's words caused the breathing of everyone to quicken. What kind of terrifying place was this? Those roars, who are those people? They are all alive. How strong are they? Someone asked. I do not know. Xiaosheng shook his head. The immortal palace is too vast. That place is simply too far away. The people of the royal sacred sect have never been there before. Hence, they could only search for it time and time again. This time around, we will wait for everyone to enter before we gather together to seize the immortal arts. The sect has already promised us that as long as we obtain the immortal arts and weapons, we will all have a chance to cultivate them. Now you can walk around, but without my orders, no one is allowed to move recklessly. You have to wait for the others to come out and regroup. Otherwise you will be killed without mercy. A terrifying aura abruptly gushed forth from Xiaosheng, containing killing intent within. It was as though he was warning everyone. Qin Wentian stood up and walked out. In this boundlessly vast desolate land, there were many ancient tombs. The hymn at this moment came before an ancient tomb. In front of Qin Wentian, there was a page of an ancient tome floating in the air. On its surface, there were numerous runes circulating around it, shining with a resplendent light. However, his will had no way to penetrate it, he couldn't see through it. This caused an intense feeling to appear in Qin Wentian's heart. He wanted to walk up and grab this ancient tome in his hands. His silhouette flickered. Qin Wentian continued roaming around this immortal graveyard, gazing at the tombs one after another. At this moment, there was a blood-colored spear in front of Qin Wentian, containing a towering might within, as though it could split apart the heavens and earth. Just by standing beside it, Qin Wentian felt as though he was on the verge of collapsing. The blood in his body involuntarily roared. It was extremely terrifying. Not only for Qin Wentian, the others who came here earlier were all staring at the ancient tombs, their hearts trembling. All of them felt an intense impulse, wanting to seize immortal weapons and immortal arts. Even with their incomparably tough wills, they couldn't resist this temptation. Finally, in this immortal graveyard, a humming sound could be heard, as though it originated from an ancient expert. In a certain location, a beam of light pierced through the skies, causing the gazes of everyone to turn in that direction. Xiaosheng's countenance was extremely unsightly to behold as a terrifying killing intent flashed in his eyes. Mo Yong, you are courting death. Xiaosheng's long hair fluttered in the wind as he roared in rage. Everyone come back and gather around me. Numerous silhouettes flickered, returning to Xiaosheng's side. Qin Wentian also walked towards Xiaosheng, but his gaze was still fixed in the direction of Mo Yong. Mo Yong, one of the geniuses of the Great Earth Sect, saw an extremely terrifying treasure. It was an ancient imprint that contained boundless earth energy floating above an immortal tomb. Mo Yong wanted to take it for himself and collect it. However, before he could grab hold of it, the tomb beneath the imprint had already been broken apart. A figure could be seen standing above the tomb. This person had a head full of demonic yellow hair that fluttered in the wind, resembling sharp swords. He was clad in an earth-colored robe, and his eyes were staring ahead. His eyes were filled with boundless immensity, causing the souls of those who looked at him to tremble. Who are you? The yellow-haired man had a gaunt countenance, exuding a boundless sharpness. He stared at Mo Yong, causing Mo Yong's body to tremble. Are you the one who buried me here, stole my treasure and sealed my fate? The voice of this person seemed to originate from the primordial era. He took a step forward, causing Mo Yong to feel a supreme pressure bearing down on him. His countenance turned pale as he shook his head. It wasn't me. You stole my treasure, sealed my fate and buried my soul. You deserve death. The yellow-haired silhouette stepped out, causing Mo Yong to explosively retreat. However, the yellow-haired silhouette merely stretched out his palms and with a thunderous boom, a prison of earth directly bound Mo Yong to his original position, wanting to bury him alive. You deserve death. A terrifying killing intent gushed forth from the eyes of this person. His head of yellow hair transformed into countless sharp yellow swords, exploding outwards. No. Save me. An expression of despair appeared on Mo Yang's face. After which, the yellow hair penetrated through his head, directly nailing him to the ground. At this moment, Xiaosheng and the others also arrived not far away. They abruptly halted their steps, only to see the yellow-haired man retracting the yellow hair that had pierced into the head of the yellow-haired man. His hair was dyed red with blood, and was extremely dazzling to the eyes, exuding a demonic aura. How powerful! The countenances of Xiaosheng and the others grew incredibly unsightly. The aura radiating from this person was merely at the peak of Heavenly Dipper, the same as many of them. Mo Yong wasn't an ordinary person, and was extremely powerful. But in front of this person, he didn't even have the ability to resist. Only to see that person turning his gaze over, staring at Xiaosheng and the others. His eyes gleamed with a yellow light, and just a single glance from him caused the souls of those who saw him to tremble. You guys sealed my fate, buried my soul and seized my treasure? That person inclined his head and stared at the sky. His eyes turned blank again as he mumbled to himself. And I, who am I? Prepare to join forces and kill him with all your might. Xiaosheng's low voice rang out. Terrifying might gushed forth from everyone, causing this entire space to tremble violently. Who am I? That person didn't seem to have sensed anything. He continued staring at the sky. Xiaosheng started to give the command as everyone surrounded the person. Control him first, act now. Xiaosheng roared. As the sound of his voice rang out, ancient vines, chains, and spatial power all exploded out at the same time. In the blink of an eye, the ancient vines wrapped around Xiaosheng, the chains dancing through the air. Boom! That person retracted his gaze and stared at Xiaosheng. The earth trembled, transforming into a prison, burying him within. At the same time, the attacks of Xiaosheng and the others arrived, frenziedly slamming into the earthen prison. The prison broke apart as the silhouette of that person appeared once more. The energy binding him had already been broken free. Boom! That person slowly stepped out. With just a single step, the body of an expert in front of him was directly buried by the earthen prison. He lifted his hand and blasted out. A casual palm strike directly shattered the earth, and with a thunderous boom, the expert inside was directly smashed into smithereens. Almost at the same time, the attacks of Xiaosheng and the others arrived. Xiaosheng's long hair fluttered in the wind as he punched out. Fist light flashed, causing the entire space to tremble, wanting to shatter everything. However, the yellow-haired figure merely lifted his hand as a terrifying earthen screen of light appeared in the air. With a thunderous boom, Xiaosheng's fist slammed down, causing cracking sounds to ring out as cracks extended outwards. However, he still wasn't able to break through the defense of his opponent. Fusion of true intents? This is a power similar to the one in the grass hut of sword comprehension. With just a wave of his hand, he could already unleash such might, causing others to be unable to see through the fusion of true intents. Too powerful. This yellow-haired figure shouted, "Seal my fate, bury my soul." Could it be that he's already dead? Or is he an immortal whose cultivation base is sealed? Qin Wentian was deeply shocked. Xiaosheng wasn't exaggerating. Any random expert that appeared in this tomb, even if their cultivation bases were suppressed, could easily kill any one of them, including Xiaosheng. This was an immortal. Even if his cultivation base was sealed, he was still an unrivaled existence in the same cultivation realm. A true unrivaled existence in Heavenly Dipper. If Qin Wentian had the combat prowess of this yellow-haired figure, he would definitely be conferred the title of unrivaled in Heavenly Dipper. Numerous tyrannical auras swept through this space, as though there were countless pairs of eyes staring at them. All of you scram for me. From the void, an incomparably demonic voice rang out. It was cold and sharp, as though issuing an unquestionable command. Instantly, those spying senses and those tyrannical auras vanished without a trace. Even Xiaosheng, who was in the midst of battle, felt his heart pounding violently. Who was the owner of that voice earlier? How strong was he? At this moment, in this boundlessly vast immortal palace, Two pairs of eyes could be seen piercing through the void, staring in this direction. One of them was clad in black, incomparably demonic and handsome. His eyes were incomparably sharp as he stared at the silhouettes in combat. There was no emotion in his cold eyes as he spoke in a low voice. Yet another bunch of people who don't know the immensity of life and death. With such weak combat prowess, they can't even pass through the immortal tomb. Do you really think they can obtain this immortal palace and everything here? It has been 80,000 years. Have you still not woken up from your dream? Chapter 635. Although Xiaosheng and the others were stunned by that cold voice, they didn't dare to delay the battle at all. The yellow-haired figure in their encirclement was simply too terrifying. With just a lift of his hand, he was able to annihilate a peak-level Heavenly Dipper sovereign. Fan Miaoyu, use your soundwave attack. At this moment, the voice of a female rang out. It was none other than an expert from the forgotten Immortal Tower. Fan Miaoyu nodded as a formless sound wave instantly gushed forth, causing the eyes of the yellow-haired figure to gleam with a cold light. He turned his gaze towards Fan Miaoyu and Fan Miaoyu only felt her body stiffening. After which, the yellow-haired figure waved his hand as a terrifying earthen yellow palm imprint directly latched onto her. Bind! Xiaosheng roared. Vines shot out, binding the yellow-haired figure once again. Slash! Wu Tung soared up into the air, cleaving down towards the yellow-haired figure. However, the yellow-haired figure lifted his hands as an earthen yellow screen of light appeared, transforming into an earthen shield. Although the axe slashed through it, it had no way to break through it. At this moment, Qin Wentian also stepped forward. His true intent of dreams gushed forth, causing the yellow-haired figure to halt. He stood there, his hair fluttering in the wind. Abruptly, the yellow-haired figure grabbed out with his hands, aiming for Qin Wentian. The true intent of dreams actually couldn't affect him. It had no way to force him into a dreamscape. Too powerful, so powerful that he could break apart any true intent. Rumble! A terrifying buzzing sound rang out as sword chi tore through the skies. Qian's white-robed figure appeared, slashing out with a sword that resembled a flying immortal from the heavens. Numerous illusory figures appeared in the air, and with a single slash of the flying immortal sword, terrifying beams of sword chi directly lacerated the body of the yellow-haired figure. Everyone, use your strongest attacks to kill him. Xiaosheng roared in rage. The shorter Tulung stepped out as a gigantic devil subduing thunder divine pestle appeared behind him. This was his astral nova, and the lightning energy within it seemed capable of shattering everything. He stomped on the ground, blasting downwards in rage. That short body of his expanded in size as the devil-subduing thunder divine pestle smashed down from the heavens. Tens of thousands of streaks of divine lightning manifested, tearing apart everything, causing the body of the yellow-haired figure to tremble involuntarily. Arg! The yellow-haired figure inclined his head and drew in a deep breath. He then opened his mouth and actually began to devour the lightning energy of the heavens and earth. Die! An expert wielded a blood-colored halberd and blasted it into the body of the yellow-haired man. The halberd penetrated the body of the yellow-haired man, absorbing his blood. However, the yellow-haired man merely turned his gaze away, allowing the halberd to penetrate his body. He continued walking forward as he punched out. With a thunderous boom, the hearts of everyone pounded. After which, a huge hole appeared in the body of the expert wielding the blood-colored halberd. His heart was directly destroyed. At this moment, the venomous scorpions crawled into the yellow-haired figure's body through the blood-red halberd, devouring his flesh and blood. The yellow-haired figure's face turned black, and his essence chi seemed to be rapidly withering. He has been poisoned by Shuekan. He will definitely die this time. The hearts of the spectators were filled with joy when they saw this scene. Shuekan was the leader of the Sky Poison faction of the Royal Sacred Sect. His poison abilities were extremely strong, and as long as he poisoned someone, no Heavenly Dipper sovereign would be able to survive. However, the eyes of the yellow-haired figure were still as sharp as ever. He glanced at the crowd before inclining his head and staring at the sky. An expression of deep desolation could be seen on his face. Very immortal, you are so ruthless. All the immortals came here to seek your inheritance, yet you chose to bury them instead. Why did you bury millions of immortals and devils? There seemed to be a trace of intelligence in the eyes of this person, as though he had recalled some memories. His words caused the hearts of the crowd to stir. Bury immortal, bury immortal. Was this the name of a supreme expert? Bury immortal? Bury millions of immortals and devils here? Why? Were these immortals also here to seize his inheritance? Even immortals wanted his inheritance? How strong was he exactly? Bury millions of immortals and devils, how strong was he exactly? No wonder that expert from the royal sacred sect said that this immortal palace had already surpassed his understanding. At this moment, the crowd discovered that although they had already regarded this immortal palace highly, they had still underestimated how mysterious and powerful it was. Attack! Xia Sheng's will was extremely resolute. He maintained his clarity of mind and gave the order to attack. He himself took the lead, punching out with his fists. A moment later, millions of fist lights manifested, shattering everything as they blasted into the body of the yellow-haired figure. The others also frenziedly attacked, but even so, the yellow-haired figure's body didn't shatter. A terrifying earthen yellow light circulated around his body. That yellow-haired figure turned his eyes over, staring at the crowd. His long yellow hair fluttered in the wind, resembling a supreme immortal or devil. Ants at the heavenly dipper realm? Ridiculous, this is too ridiculous. You buried an immortal and a devil, yet you allowed a bunch of ants to enter this place. Could it be that you buried millions of immortals and devils, because you wanted to nurture them from this level, allowing them to inherit your legacy? The yellow-haired figure laughed maniacally, as though he had gone mad. He didn't want to believe this. Back then, when so many immortals and devils came here to seize his inheritance, all of them were annihilated and buried here. Killing millions of immortals and devils, just for the sake of a heavenly dipper realm ant? This was too ridiculous. He himself even became a test for these heavenly dipper realm ants, sealing his cultivation base at this level, so that he could fight against them. Since this is what you want, I shall grant you your wish. I don't know how many years you have waited, but I hope that the person you are waiting for will appear. Let's see if the ant you used millions of immortals and devils to nurture would be able to inherit your glory. The yellow-haired figure continued howling madly, after which, an earthen yellow light radiated from him. With a thunderous boom, his body exploded, transforming into dust that scattered across the sky, completely vanishing. An incomparably terrifying might forced everyone to retreat. Many of them coughed out blood as their countenances turned as pale as paper. Qin Wentian was also flung through the air, coughing out 2 mouthfuls of blood. His countenance was pale as he crawled back up. His eyes flickered as his heart trembled unceasingly. It was as though he was recalling the words spoken by the yellow-haired figure, burying millions of immortals and devils to nurture a heavenly dipper realm ant as his successor? These immortals and devils were prepared by the master of this immortal palace for his successor? Millions of immortals and devils came here to seize the inheritance. Yet they were all annihilated and buried here just for the sake of a weakling at the heavenly dipper realm. How extravagant was this? And what sort of supreme character was the master of this immortal palace? An immortal like the sect leader of the royal sacred sect? Their cultivation levels were simply too low. Any one of the tombs here would be stronger than the sect leader of the royal sacred sect. Easy. A few silhouettes flickered as they sped towards the ancient imprint floating in the air. Keep. A figure instantly descended. Upon seeing the person who obtained the ancient imprint, the eyes of everyone flashed. It was none other than Zaiqiu. Momentarily, no one dared to act recklessly. That ancient imprint shall be kept by Zaiqiu. Xia Sheng spoke, his words causing the hearts of everyone to be filled with worries. That ancient imprint was an immortal ranked item. Nobody knew what it contained. Since it was obtained by Zaiqiu, he most probably wouldn't hand it over. Earlier, I was somewhat surprised. Why would that person have intelligence? Xia Sheng frowned as he shook his head. Xia Sheng, has such a situation never happened before? The sect told me that it hasn't happened before. All the immortals buried here have already forgotten everything. That person earlier, seems to have awoken. Xiaosheng's heart trembled as he continued. Seems like the harvest this time around would be bountiful. Even if we don't obtain anything, we can still report this news to the sect. Everyone fell silent. Indeed, just like what Xiaosheng said, if this news were to be circulated out, those from outside the royal sacred region would definitely come here. Since we're already here, we can't let this trip be in vain. With our lineup this time around, how can we not obtain an immortal rank treasure? Zaichio's voice rang out, causing many to turn their gazes onto him only to hear someone nodding in agreement. Zaichio's words are right. Since we're already here, how can we return empty-handed? Xiaosheng stared at Zaichio as he similarly nodded his head. Let's wait for the others. There will definitely be more people coming out later. We can't let anyone be the same as Mo Yong. If not, even if he doesn't die in the hands of those buried immortals, I will personally kill him. Let's wait for Void Cloud and Loneliness to come out and coordinate with their formations. Even for immortals, as long as they are suppressed to the Heavenly Dipper realm, we can still kill them. Zaichio nodded. This time around, the experts of the Royal Sacred Sect entered the Immortal Palace. Void Cloud and Loneliness, these two grandmasters of divine inscriptions, were the key. Without the two of them, it would be extremely difficult to kill the buried immortals. Fan Miaoyu, Wu Teng, both of you have come out. Qin Wentian stared at Fan Miaoyu and Wu Teng as he nodded his head to them. The two of them came out later than him, but being able to walk out of that passageway was already very strong. Fan Miaoyu, follow me. At this moment, the expert from the Forgotten Immortal Tower who spoke to Fan Miaoyu earlier spoke. Fan Miaoyu was one of the core members of the Forgotten Immortal Tower. Although she wasn't very familiar with the experts from the Forgotten Immortal Tower, they were still from the same faction after all. Fan Miaoyu glanced at Qin Wentian as she smiled. She then turned her head back and nodded to the female expert who spoke to her. I will have to trouble senior sister to take care of them. As the others closed their eyes, more and more people came out from the passageway. Instantly, there would be people informing them of the situation here. Void Cloud and Loneliness finally came out as well. In fact, the two of them had already started inscribing divine inscriptions in front of an immortal tomb. Qin Wentian stared at the two of them inscribing a support-type divine inscriptions formation. This formation was extremely huge and extremely complicated. The attainments of the two of them in the Tao of divine inscriptions were definitely extremely high. After an entire day, the divine inscriptions formation was finally completed. This formation was actually in the form of a gigantic golden rock, facing the immortal tomb ahead. This formation is known as the Golden Rock Grand Formation. Its might is boundless and can be coordinated by many people. As long as you stand in your respective positions, when any one of you attacks, you can control the strength of the entire formation as well as the others. No matter how strong the experts in the immortal tomb are, they would still die. Cloud spoke to everyone. He was extremely confident in the formation he inscribed. Qin Wentian also knew how powerful this formation was and how terrifying it was. Not only that, there were so many powerful Heavenly Dipper sovereigns supporting it. Let me assign the positions. Xiaosheng spoke. Qin Xikong, the two of you have the strongest attacks. Bring Qin Wentian and Wu Teng to guard the front of the formation. Zaichio, bring people to guard the wings. I will guard the claws. Shueqin and Fan Miaoyu will guard the back. Xiaosheng instructed. Qin Wentian furrowed his brows. Others might not be able to see the use of this arrangement, but he was extremely proficient in divine inscriptions, and was extremely clear about Xiaosheng's arrangements. The person at the front of the formation would directly face the attacks of immortals, and would be in the most danger. The wings of the formation were the most flexible, and had the strongest attacks. The other point was the claws, which was the position Xiaosheng was guarding. The back of the formation was the one that caught everyone by surprise. But in reality, the person who could control this formation was also in the position of the wings of the formation. If we succeed, who would the treasures belong to? Qin Wentian asked. He hadn't joined the Royal Sacred Sect yet. He naturally wouldn't be willing to guard the most dangerous position without any benefits at all. Zaichio frowned. He stared at Qin Wentian as he spoke. Stop talking nonsense. just follow the orders. Chapter 636. As the sound of Zaiqiu's voice faded, a cold light flickered in Qin Wentian's eyes. There was no need to doubt that Zaiqiu's status in the royal sacred sect was extraordinary. Although Xiaosheng was the core of the crowd, the person who obtained the imprint earlier was none other than Zaiqiu. Not only that, no one dared to have any thoughts of snatching it away. Just follow the order? Qin Wentian laughed. From the moment Zaiqiu obtained the imprint earlier, he already knew that there was no need for the others to interfere. Following the order and placing himself in the most dangerous situation. Qin Wentian wasn't someone who would be so selfless. We have to make things clear. If not, wouldn't our deaths be in vain? Qin Wentian spoke. Many fell silent. This was also what they wanted to ask. Although the experts of the royal sacred sect promised that they could share the immortal art with them, could they really do so? What about the immortal treasures? That was something that couldn't be shared. Earlier when Zaiqiu snatched the imprint, he didn't ask for their opinion. Although they didn't dare to say it out loud, it didn't mean that they didn't have any thoughts. Qin Wentian. Zaiqiu stared at Qin Wentian as a cold smile flickered in his eyes. I've long heard of you. You are very famous and your talent is high, but you have to understand that this place is controlled by the royal sacred sect. Here, you better put down your arrogance. You don't have the qualifications to be impudent here. If you don't wish to participate, you can scram now. It's not that I wanted to come, it's the royal sacred sect who invited me. Qin Wentian stared straight at Zaiqiu as he coldly spoke. If you don't want me to participate, I don't mind. But please keep your mouth clean. Even if you are a core disciple of the royal sacred sect, I have nothing to do with you. A light laughter rang out. It was none other than that female from the Grand Shang faction. She didn't forget to throw stones at Qin Wentian when he was down. How arrogant! My royal sacred sect invited him here. Zaiqiu, what a great uncle you are. This woman knew what kind of person Zaiqiu was. Naturally, she would not miss this opportunity to deepen the conflict between Zaiqiu and Qin Wentian. Zaiqiu's countenance had already turned heavy. Just when he wanted to speak, Qin quietly interjected. We have to make things clear. The majority of the people here are disciples of the royal sacred sect. I have no objections if we all face danger together. But if we only face danger with no benefits at all, what's the point of this? Qin's words still carried some weight. He was a disciple of the battle sword faction of the royal sacred sect, and was extremely powerful. His statement indicated that he was standing on the side of Qin Wentian. Qin, in your opinion, what should we do? Besides, Zaiqiu was a young man with a face filled with arrogance. His age seemed to be even younger than Zaiqiu, and he was none other than Sun Qing from the core faction of the royal sacred sect. His strength was also extremely powerful, and he was a fellow apprentice brother of Xiaosheng and Zaiqiu. This Qin was a disciple of the battle sword faction of the royal sacred sect. The disciples of this faction were the most arrogant and difficult to tame. They wouldn't listen to their orders, and right now when Sun Qing saw Qin refuting Zaiqiu, unhappiness could be seen on his face. If we obtain an immortal art, it shall be controlled by the person who obtained it. Once someone obtains it, no one else is allowed to snatch it away. Since it's an immortal art, we shall hand it over to Senior Ji after we obtain it. If we obtain an immortal treasure, it shall be handed over to Senior Ji by the person who obtained it. Even if we hand it over to Senior Ji, we have to make things clear. Only then would the sect be able to reward or punish the person who obtained it. Qin's voice was extremely calm, neither servile nor overbearing. Impudent, Senior Ji has already instructed us to listen to Senior Xiaosheng's orders. Qin, are you deaf? Sun Qing berated. I'm just stating the facts. Since everyone has different opinions, it's not too much for me to voice out my opinion. Naturally, if all the fellow apprentices are willing to listen to Xiaosheng's orders, I will naturally comply as well. Qin faintly spoke. Sun Qing turned his gaze onto the others, but momentarily, the gazes of the crowd shifted away from him. Evidently, they all silently agreed to Qin's words. Since someone was willing to take the lead, they were more than happy to sit back and enjoy the fruits of others' labor. Zaichio's eyes flashed with a cold light. After which, he stared at Qin and stated, "Fine, we shall do as you say. However, in order to prevent the various fellow apprentices from fighting over the treasures, the rules shall be changed slightly. Whoever is the last to kill the tomb immortal shall obtain the treasures temporarily. Does anyone have any objections?" "We're willing to listen to Zaichio's opinion. Since Zaichio has spoken, we will naturally do as you say." The crowd all agreed, causing Zaichio's lips to curl up in a cold smile. However, those who stood in their positions pretended not to see it. "Enough, we're all fellow apprentices of the same sect. There's no need to bicker over such a minor matter. Since Zaichio has already spoken, let's all do our best. Naturally, the immortal treasures won't be lacking." At this moment, Xiaosheng spoke. Qin and Zaichio's suggestion can also encourage everyone to put in more effort in killing the tomb immortal. Next, I hope that everyone can be united as one. If not, everyone has already seen how dangerous it is. That's only natural. We're all fellow apprentices of the same sect. I hope that no one will encounter any danger. Qin nodded, radiating a righteous aura. Siko glanced at Qin, his face filled with disdain. He understood Quin's character very well. Quin's personality was straightforward and magnanimous. However, these people from the core faction most probably wouldn't have the same thoughts as him. "Let's do it." Xiaosheng spoke. Instantly, divine inscriptions flashed as a raging wind gusted. Qin, Siko, Qin Wentian and Wu Ting stood at the head of the golden rock. At this moment, Xiaosheng, who was standing in the direction of the rock's talons, made a grabbing motion in the air. With a thunderous boom, the sword floating above the tomb shattered apart as a terrifying sword intent gushed forth, exuding an aura that seemed to originate from the primordial era. The biting cold wind whistled, piercing the bodies of everyone. A white-robed silhouette appeared above the tomb. A look of confusion flashed in his eyes as he stared at the crowd before him. He stretched out his hand, as though he was sensing his own strength. "Why are you all so weak?" A hoarse voice rang out, filled with a sense of humiliation. His eyes abruptly turned sharp, and in an instant, everyone felt as though they were being penetrated by sword light. "Are you all the ones who buried me here?" This person slowly walked forward, his sword chi towering up into the sky. At this instant, everyone felt a surge of sword might enveloping them. "Attack." Xiaosheng spoke. Qin nodded. Divine inscriptions glowed with resplendent light as the rock screeched. Sword chi lacerated the heavens as a myriad of silhouettes manifested in the form of a soaring immortal sword. "Why are you all so weak?" That white-robed silhouette pointed his finger at the air, causing the sword light to converge and revolve frenziedly. A raging wind gusted. Zaichio and the other experts in the formation feather positions acted. The gigantic shadow of the golden rock moved, drifting forward as a corrosive palm imprint blasted out, aiming for the white-robed silhouette. The palm of the white-robed silhouette sliced through the air, slashing apart everything. The sharp talons of the golden rock slashed out, while Xiaosheng and the other experts in the formation feather positions unleashed an indomitable vibrational fist light that could destroy everything. That white-robed silhouette drew in a deep breath as he soared up into the air. Boundless sword light gathered around him as he howled in rage. Step by step, he stared at the gigantic shadow of the golden rock as his sword chi rampaged through the heavens and earth, lacerating everything in its path. Rumble! The wings of the golden rock flapped as the shadow of the golden rock rushed out. The entire golden rock formation seemed to be floating in the air. Everyone was in their respective positions, frenziedly attacking. Qin Wentian and the other three experts directly appeared in front of the white-robed silhouette. "He's doing this on purpose." The movements of the golden rock are controlled by the formation feather. Qin Wentian spoke to Qin and the others. The left wing was controlled by Zaichio while the right wing was controlled by Sun Qing. "Do your best to attack." Qin calmly spoke, "Thousand slaughters sword art." As the sound of his voice faded, sword chi gushed forth as tens of thousands of beams of sword light blasted out. Borrowing the might of the formation, their strength was even more shocking. Saiku also attacked, but his sword technique was different from Qin's. Both of them were heaven-chosen from the battle sword faction in the Royal Sacred Sect. Quinn's swordsmanship was straight, while Saika's swordsmanship was unconventional. The evil dragon sword art, thunder-defying slash, each of his sword techniques were extremely crafty and dangerous. Not only for them, everyone else also launched their frenzied attacks. That white-robed silhouette stood in front of the gigantic golden rock. That seemingly insignificant silhouette erupted forth with an overwhelming amount of energy. Each of his sword strikes contained a sure-kill might. Yet more than half of his strength was negated by the shadow of the golden rock. But even so, Qin Wentian still felt a sense of danger. Press forward, let him be in the center of the golden rock. Wouldn't it be easier to kill him then? Qin Wentian spoke. Momentarily, his wings flapped as the golden rock pressed forward, appearing in the airspace above the white-robed silhouette. Countless beams of light blasted downwards, yet the white-robed silhouette didn't know how to dodge. Right now, he was in a daze and only wanted to kill. Close up, everyone attack. Xiaoxing roared. Momentarily, the golden rock's wings closed as the golden rock pressed downwards, burying the white-robed silhouette beneath it. Everyone simultaneously unleashed their strongest attacks. The eyes of the white-robed silhouette gleamed with a towering sword light. He abandoned his sword and stood upright, closing his eyes as he pressed his palms into the air. His entire person erupted with a boundless killing intent as an intense light blotted out the skies, blinding the eyes of everyone. The sword chi shredded apart the formation as terrifying rumbling sounds echoed out. The destructive might of the formation tore apart everything, causing the formation to collapse. Everyone was forced back, causing dust to billow up into the air. The white-robed silhouette stood there, bathed in blood, exuding a feeling of a hero past his prime. A top-tier fourth-rank support formation, and tens of heavenly dipper sovereigns who have comprehended true intent were actually forced to such an extent. The hearts of the crowd trembled. The white-robed silhouette turned his gaze over, and walked towards the direction of Qin and Qin Wentian as he coldly spoke. Your swords are too weak. As the sound of his voice faded, he pointed his finger in the air. Instantly, a supreme sword might controlled everything. Qin and Saiku wielded their swords, yet they felt their sword intents being controlled by someone else. The white-robed silhouette was covered in blood, yet he still continued walking forward step by step. Qin, Saiku, the two of you block the attacks. The others should launch a pincer attack to kill him. Zaiqiu spoke, his words causing the expressions of everyone to freeze. This Zaiqiu was so ruthless, telling Qin and the others to face the white-robed silhouette head-on. Even if they managed to kill the white-robed silhouette in the end, the price they had to pay would be the sacrifice of Qin and the others. Qin Wentian stared at the white-robed silhouette, activating the true intent of his dreams. However, that formless sword chi seemed to be able to tear the white-robed silhouette apart. Numerous water screens appeared as sound waves gushed forth, whistling towards the white-robed silhouette. It was Fan Miaoyu who acted. Let's go. Qin and the other three instantly dodged to the two sides. A beam of sword chi shot out like a rainbow, slicing apart the sound waves. The white-robed silhouette appeared once more. Although he was heavily injured, the sword might he unleashed wasn't affected at all. He turned and stared at Fan Miaoyu. Damn. Sun Qing was extremely depressed. His plan was actually foiled. The killing move he had prepared earlier erupted forth as lava gushed towards the white-robed silhouette. Puchi! A beam of sword light slashed the lava apart. At the same time, the lava-like flames enveloped the white-robed silhouette, instantly incinerating him. This scene caused Sun Qing to be extremely excited. Kill him, seems like he can't hold on any longer. As the sound of his voice faded, he discovered a pair of incomparably cold eyes staring at him. After which, the white-robed silhouette stepped out step by step. Sun Qing and Fan Miaoyu weren't far away from each other. Yet at the same time, they discovered that they were being locked onto. With every step the white-robed silhouette took, they felt that they were one step closer to death. That fiery figure wanted to kill them even if he had to die. Busy. The white-robed silhouette rushed out, akin to a beam of supreme sword light. Qin saved Sun Qing. Zaiqiu roared. Qin and the other three took a detour, nearing Fan Miaoyu. They were the ones closest to Sun Qing and Fan Miaoyu. It was too late. The white-robed silhouette transformed into two beams of supreme sword light, shooting towards Sun Qing and Fan Miaoyu respectively. Die! Qin Wentian roared as he blasted out with his palms. Qin also moved, unleashing a soaring immortal sword. Pung! The sword light slashed towards Fan Miaoyu, colliding with an illusory palm imprint. After which, Qin rushed over and unleashed the might of the soaring immortal sword, forcibly blocking that attack. Both he and Fan Miaoyu were flung backwards from the impact, but Sun Qing wasn't so lucky. The other beam of sword light pierced through his throat despite his all-out attack. Chapter 637. Sun Jing. Xiaosheng and Zaiqiu both cried out in alarm, their faces instantly turning pale. Sun Qing was the junior apprentice brother of the two of them, and the relationship between the three of them had always been very good. Xiaosheng and Zaiqiu both treated Sun Qing like an elder brother, and Sun Qing's talent was also very strong. In the future, it was very likely that he would have great achievements in the core faction. He was young and full of vigor, so Xiaosheng would tolerate him. As for Zaiqiu, Sun Qing had always listened to him, and the three of them were like brothers. But now Sun Qing was dead. He had died right in front of them. Why not save him? A terrifying killing intent flashed on Zaiqiu's face as he stared at Qin and Qin Wentian. They had the chance to save Sun Qing, yet they chose to save Fan Miaoyu instead. Qin Wentian furrowed his brows. Earlier, when they were being attacked, Zaiqiu had shouted for them to withstand the attacks by themselves before launching a pincer attack. Only Fan Miaoyu had acted to help them. Even if Qin Wentian didn't care about his sinister intentions, Fan Miaoyu and Sun Jing were in danger together. It was only logical that they would choose to save Fan Miaoyu. I regret Sun Qing's death, but in this situation, we can only save one person, Qin calmly replied. Didn't I say to save Sun Qing? A cold light flashed in Zaiqiu's eyes. Yes, but at that time, it was already too late to consider. We could only rely on our instincts to attack. Qin's voice didn't contain the slightest hint of anger. Zaiqiu's countenance turned extremely dark. But at this moment, that strand of sword light in the distance actually fused together with the ancient sword that was floating above the tomb not long ago, bringing with it a towering sword qi as it whistled over. In the vast land, the sword qi swept over, causing the sounds of rage to echo out as dust rose into the air. One after another, ancient tombs began to explode, each of them emanating an aura that originated from the primordial era. Zaiqiu! Xiaosheng shouted. His countenance was extremely unsightly to behold. The gazes of the crowd turned over, only to see the supreme geniuses appearing on top of the destroyed tombs. They stood there staring at the sky, their eyes filled with confusion. After which, towering amounts of rage engulfed the heavens and earth as they roared. It's over. Everyone's faces paled. They could feel their hearts pounding. Just a single buried immortal was already inconceivably powerful. Now the ancient tombs were exploding one after another, causing many buried immortals to appear. How were they supposed to contend against them? Run! Everyone had the same thought. Right now, they could only run. Scatter and escape, or we'll all be caught in one fell swoop. Xiaosheng roared. From afar, a silhouette had already appeared. The experts of the various sects instantly dispersed, fleeing in different directions. Qin Wentian, Saiku, Qin Wuteng, Fan Miaoyu, and the others all sprinted towards the direction of the passageway. Not only them, many others were also making detours in the same direction, preparing to leave. A terrifying gust of wind howled in the void. A shadow streaked across the sky. In the blink of an eye, a figure dressed in a green robe stood there with his hands behind his back at the exit. The power wrapped around his body was like an ancient aura. We can't get out. Saiku made a prompt decision and fled to the side alone. The strength of these buried immortals were all abnormally strong. Even if all of them worked together, they might not be able to move them. Since the exit had been blocked, it was destined to be a dead end. There are quite a few buried immortals. If we scatter and escape, our chances of survival will be higher, Qin said in a low voice. Qin Wentian nodded slightly, Everyone take care. Take care. Wu-Ting nodded. After which, the few of them scattered and fled in different directions. Unleashing the fiend transformation art, Qin Wentian actually transformed into a golden-winged great rock. His body arced through the air in a beautiful arc, whistling through the air like a golden beam of light. At this moment, a figure below inclined his head, staring in the direction of Qin Wentian. His eyes gleamed with a demonic light as a pair of wings unfurled from his back, speeding towards Qin Wentian with lightning speed. Qin Wentian's speed was already extremely fast. However, the speed of this person was even faster. The two of them, one in front and one behind, streaked through the skies, traveling an unknown distance in the blink of an eye. Qin Wentian soon discovered that he was being targeted. His countenance grew extremely unsightly to behold. He continued speeding through the air for a few moments before he halted and descended to the ground, transforming back into his human form. Turning around, he stared at the figure that was chasing after him. It was a gray-robed man with a demonic countenance. This person floated in the air, staring at Qin Wentian with a blank look in his eyes. "Senior," Qin Wentian called out. However, the gray-robed man flapped his wings as a gray-robed figure sped towards him. Qin Wentian's blood surged as he lifted his palms in anger. His palms glowed with runic light as he executed the star-seizing palm imprint. However, the gray-robed man casually lifted his palms as a resplendent treasure light shone from his palms. He resembled an immortal bird that shot out in anger. With a thunderous boom, Qin Wentian's palm imprint was smashed into smithereens. Qin Wentian coughed out a mouthful of blood as his aura fluctuated unsteadily. Just when he wanted to stand up, the sound of wind drifted over. The gray-robed man had already appeared before him, lowering his head to stare at him. "Who are you and who am I?" The gray-robed man spoke, his voice sounding extremely demonic. His countenance was like lightning, exuding a sense of terror. "This junior is Qin Wentian. I have no idea who senior is." Qin Wentian replied. The strength of this person was so strong that it caused fear in the hearts of others. "In that case, why are you here? Why is my cultivation base sealed?" The robes of the gray-robed man fluttered in the wind. There was a look of confusion in his eyes. The sharpness of his demonic eyes seemed to be able to see through Qin Wentian. "I only know that this place seems to be a burial ground for immortals. I'm currently in an immortal palace." Qin Wentian replied. "Burial of immortals. Burial of immortals." The gray-robed man mumbled he felt a splitting headache. He inclined his head and stared at the sky. "Burial of immortals, why does it sound so familiar? Who are these immortals? Why did they seal me under a tomb?" His voice gradually grew louder as a raging wind gusted by. Demonic chi gushed forth from him as he flapped his wings and soared up into the sky. He was like a bolt of lightning as a towering tyrannical aura radiated from him. It was unknown how many years they had been buried under a tomb. No wonder these people were filled with hatred and killing intent after they came out. Qin Wentian's entire body was drenched in sweat as he sighed in his heart. Compared to these buried immortals, the so-called unrivaled experts in Heavenly Dipper weren't even worthy of a mention. After consuming a medicinal pill, Qin Wentian continued on his way. Numerous ancient tombs could be seen everywhere. Qin Wentian saw a sword tomb and walked over to it. He could sense the sword might exuding from the tomb as he closed his eyes in meditation. After a long time, he stood up and continued on his way. Occasionally, he would come across an ancient tomb, and would sit before it to sense the aura exuding from it. Time slowly flowed by. He has already been here for over a month. This desolate land was boundlessly vast. It was unknown how vast it was. There seemed to be no end to it. That voice he heard before wasn't just saying it to scare him. Burial of immortals, burial of immortals. Millions and millions of immortals and devils were buried here. That supreme existence who buried immortals, did he really do so to nurture his successor? If one wanted to become the successor of this immortal palace, what sort of talent must one have? That demonic and tyrannical voice from the void. Where did it originate from? Who was the owner of that voice? MHM? At this moment, Qin Wentian sensed someone staring at him. He then coldly spoke, "Come out." As the sound of his voice faded, a silhouette appeared behind an ancient tomb, staring at Qin Wentian, who was sitting cross-legged before it. This person was short and muscular, and was none other than the leader of the Violet Thunder sect, Tu Lung. Tu Lung stared at Qin Wentian, his eyes gleaming with coldness. He slowly walked towards Qin Wentian. Yet he gave Qin Wentian a sense of danger. Brother Wentian, why are you here as well? Tu Lung narrowed his eyes as he smiled. It was as though he was very familiar with Qin Wentian. What's the matter? Qin Wentian indifferently asked. I heard that you have many trump cards up your sleeves. In the immortal martial realm, you even obtained some extremely powerful innate techniques. This immortal palace is filled with danger, and Brother Wentian might die at any moment. Why don't you impart them to me? Tu Lung coldly laughed as he walked towards Qin Wentian. At this moment, Qin Wentian had already stood up. He faintly spoke. Is that so? How about I impart them to you now? As he spoke, the blood in Qin Wentian's body seethed as his countenance turned demonic. Astral light circulated around him, incomparably resplendent. Sure, I'm coming to collect them. Tu Lung's silhouette flickered as blood-colored lightning coiled around him, exuding a terrifying sense of danger, as well as a fearsome destructive might. Boom! Tu Lung's palms blasted out as bolts of blood-colored lightning arced through the skies, directly blasting towards Qin Wentian's body. Instantly, Qin Wentian only felt a blood-colored calamity descending upon him. Every strand of lightning that blasted into his body caused Qin Wentian's blood to go numb as he felt his entire body becoming immobile. Bzzz. Qin Wentian abruptly turned. With a flap of his wings, he transformed into a bolt of lightning as he sped away. Haha, Brother Qin, why are you in such a hurry to leave? Tu Lung stepped out, and with every step he took, Qin Wentian felt his entire body shuddering as an unparalleled pressure bore down on him. Tu Lung had comprehended 4 types of true intents. You won't be able to escape. Tu Lung's speed was similarly fast. Every step he took caused the heavens and earth to tremble. Qin Wentian only felt the blood-colored lightning gushing into his body, wanting to paralyze his blood vessels. At this moment, a towering sword qi gushed forth from Qin Wentian, causing Tu Lung to furrow his brows. After which, he only saw Qin Wentian abruptly turning and dashing towards him with lightning speed. Similarly, Tu Lung stepped out in the air, and with every step he took, a supreme sword might gushed forth, wanting to kill Tu Lung's heart. Tu Lung's countenance changed. He stepped out in the air as his terrifying true intent of Great Earth erupted forth, wanting to crush Qin Wentian. The two of them walked towards each other. True intent of sword. You actually comprehended 3 types of true intents. Tu Lung stared at Qin Wentian as the blood-colored lightning energy radiating from him blotted out the sun, illuminating the entire space. Die! Tu Lung roared in rage as the blood-colored lightning bolts blasted forth. Qin Wentian similarly roared as his sword hummed. Sword light swept out, lacerating Tu Lung's condensed armor. The two of them continued rushing towards each other, instantly colliding into each other. Sword imprint divine energy gathered in his palms as Qin Wentian's body expanded in size. Even his robes were shredded apart, yet his entire body was covered in a layer of armor. Numerous silhouettes appeared as his sword slashed down. Tu Lung's body expanded under the might of the lightning. His entire person was bathed in blood-colored lightning as he blasted out explosively, causing the blood in Qin Wentian's body to feel as though it was on the verge of collapsing. What a powerful attack! Qin Wentian felt as though the blood in his body was about to explode. However, the demonic blood in his body roared even more violently as the shadow of a demon king could be seen within. The aura from him grew increasingly violent. Boom boom boom. The two of them clashed in close-range combat. The divine energy in Qin Wentian's body seethed as he erupted forth with all his might. The auras of the two of them fluctuated wildly as blood seeped out from the corners of Qin Wentian's mouth. But even so, terrifying rumbling sounds rang out unceasingly as a towering demonic might engulf the entire space. Are you going to die or not? Tu Lung icily spoke. The boundless blood-colored lightning seemed as though it wanted to shatter everything in Qin Wentian's body. Qin Wentian drew in a deep breath as blood flowed unceasingly from his wounds. A demonic light gleamed in his eyes as he stared at Tu Lung. Thank you for this battle. As the sound of his voice faded, an even more violent demonic chi gushed forth, shaking the heavens and earth. A blood-colored light engulfed the entire space. Tu Lung's countenance turned incredibly unsightly as he explosively retreated. The true intent of the mandate of demons, Qin Wentian had comprehended 4 different true intents. Not only that, his aura was also soaring upwards. Sir, where do you think you are going? A ghostly voice drifted over. Tu Lung turned his head, only to see a silhouette he had never seen before. He was so frightened that his guts were about to shatter. Was this a buried immortal? In this place, as long as it was someone he had never seen before, Tu Lung would naturally assume that they were buried immortals. However, this person in front of him wasn't. Chapter 638. Tu Lung turned and moved in the direction of Qin Wentian. Compared to Qin Wentian, the buried immortals were simply too dangerous. Tu Lung had no way to contend against them. Let's join forces or both of us will die. Tu Lung stared at Qin Wentian. At this moment, the demonic chi from Qin Wentian gushed forth, as though a supreme demon king was awakening. His gaze was like a demon, staring at Tu Lung. His countenance was incomparably calm as he spoke. Is that so? You will die, but I won't. Are you crazy? Tu Lung cursed. The figure behind him was getting closer, frightening Tu Lung so much that he felt his entire body turning cold. He isn't crazy. Do you see clearly who I am? A voice rang out from behind. Tu Lung turned sideways and was sandwiched in the middle. He glanced at the newcomer. Who are you? I am him and he is also me, the newcomer calmly replied. Crazy, all of you are crazy. The blood-colored lightning around Tu Lung's body rumbled madly. He rushed towards Qin Wentian, the blood-colored lightning opening up a path for him. The entire space around him transformed into a blood-colored space, and with a thunderous boom, Qin Wentian's body seemed to explode. The blood-colored lightning penetrated through Qin Wentian's body, and a hole could be seen in Qin Wentian's body. However, Qin Wentian's eyes were still fixated on Tu Lung. Something's wrong. Tu Lung suddenly felt his entire body turning cold. He heard that Qin Wentian was proficient in the true intent of dreams. This was the true intent of dreams, able to cause people to unknowingly fall into a deep slumber. Boom! The terrifying lightning directly blasted into his body. Tu Lung felt pain all over his body as the dream shattered. His entire body was drenched in cold sweat. As expected, it was a dream. The Qin Wentian before him was completely fine, with no injuries at all, let alone the hole in his body. I want you dead. Tu Lung rushed towards Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian simply stood there, smiling at Tu Lung, allowing Tu Lung's attack to land on his body. Under Tu Lung's shocked gaze, another large hole appeared on Qin Wentian's body. Staring at the smiling eyes of Qin Wentian, Tu Lung felt as though he was about to plunge into hell. A light sound rang out. Tu Lung completely woke up from his dream. His original body hadn't moved at all. At this moment, he lowered his head and stared at the sharp sword that pierced through his heart. That sharp sword was currently wreaking havoc in his body, shredding everything apart. He stared at Qin Wentian who was in front of him as a look of bewilderment appeared on his face. He also wanted to look at the person behind him, but he could no longer turn his body. Double dreamscape. How can your true meaning of dream be so strong? Tu Lung stared at Qin Wentian. He also had some understanding of the true meaning of dream. This true meaning was extremely marvelous, but it had its flaws as well. If not, wouldn't it be easy to kill someone if they were trapped in a dream? The flaw of the true meaning of dream was that in order to trap someone in a dream, one had to focus their mind and will. Bringing someone into one's dream was extremely taxing. At this moment, if the user of the true meaning of dream took the initiative to attack, the dreamscape would become unstable and flaws would easily appear. Unless the target was extremely weak, the user of the true meaning of dream wouldn't take the initiative to attack. Earlier, Tu Lung clearly felt that he had already left the dream. But why was he still in a dream? The first time you broke free from my dream, the moment you turned to look at him, you were already in his dream. The second time, that was my dream. I didn't move but he could kill you. Qin Wentian calmly spoke. At this moment, Tu Lung felt a bone-chilling coldness in his heart. He couldn't even swallow his anger as he mumbled, "That was your avatar." Qin Wentian didn't say anything, nor did he deny it. Tu Lung's eyes flashed with regret and despair. After which, a malevolent smile flickered in his eyes. "An opponent like you is truly too terrifying. However, you will definitely die. He will definitely not spare you." Pucci. Di Tian's sword trembled violently. Tu Lung's laughter abruptly stopped as his gaze turned sluggish. The person behind him was none other than Di Tian, an incarnation formed using the great Nirvana immortal art. His original body and his incarnation were almost the same, almost as demon-level characters. Qin Wentian had long made arrangements for his avatar. The great Nirvana immortal art allowed him to create a body that was completely different from ordinary people. During normal times, he would allow Di Tian to cultivate peacefully while his original body roamed the world. This way, his cultivation base would increase faster, and if his original body died outside, at the very least, he would still be alive. Di Tian would be Qin Wentian's shadow, a shadow that would rarely appear in Qin Wentian's life. Di Tian would only appear at crucial moments, just like in this immortal burial ground. Di Tian also wouldn't affect his life. Qin Wentian wouldn't allow the avatar created by the great Nirvana immortal art to disturb him. Di Tian would only be his weapon, a weapon hidden in the shadows. Not only that, Di Tian's future cultivation path would be different from Qin Wentian's. Only then would he be able to unleash his greatest potential, allowing Di Tian to grow together with his original body. Di Tian would become his ultimate killing weapon. After Di Tian took the treasures from Tu Lung's body, he sped away, not staying together with Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian also left this place, and very swiftly, the two of them found a place to cultivate as they took out Yuan meteor stones to cultivate. The astral energy in their bodies seethed frenziedly, cleansing their arterial pathways and acupoints, tempering their astral novas. Intense rumbling sounds rang out from their bodies, and in the short span of a day, both Qin Wentian and Di Tian broke through, stepping into the 8th level of Heavenly Dipper. Before this, they made use of the Grand Formation to fight against the buried immortal. The swordsman's swordsmanship caused Qin Wentian to have a deep comprehension, and after that, when he roamed the immortal burial grounds, he comprehended the true intent of sword. At the same time, his true intent of the mandate of demons was also on the verge of breaking through. Coincidentally, Tu Lung appeared and engaged in a violent battle, causing his blood to boil. Despite being injured, Qin Wentian also fought with all his might. The power of demons was just like this, violent, fearless, bloodthirsty, and at the end of the battle, Qin Wentian's true intent of the mandate of demons was born. The tyrannical true intent of the mandate of demons caused his bloodline to undergo a transformation, frenziedly cleansing his body, causing a chain reaction. His cultivation base actually showed signs of breaking through. This was also the reason why Tu Lung wanted to leave earlier. He could sense that Qin Wentian was already on the verge of breaking through. He knew that his own battle was being used by Qin Wentian, allowing Qin Wentian to succeed. Hence, the current Qin Wentian had already broken through to the 8th level of Heavenly Dipper, comprehending 4 types of true intents: force, dream sleep, demon, sword. His combat prowess wasn't merely a level stronger than before. If he appeared on the sacred battle platform again, he could easily insta-kill Lu Lan and Di Shi. His opponents basically had no way to resist. Even for an expert like Tu Lung, he had the confidence to suppress him. Next, what Qin Wentian truly needed to pursue was the unrivaled realm in Heavenly Dipper. He wanted to be truly unrivaled in Heavenly Dipper. After seeing the combat prowess of the buried immortal, Qin Wentian understood that even the current him was still very far away from that. The strength of the buried immortal was simply too terrifying. Even Tu Lung couldn't withstand a single strike from him. After breaking through, Qin Wentian and Di Tian didn't roam around aimlessly. Instead, they chose to stabilize their cultivation bases and familiarize themselves with the power of their true intents. Only then would they be able to use them more freely in combat. Over 10 days later, Qin Wentian and Di Tian continued exploring the depths of this burial ground. There were millions and millions of ancient tombs here. It was as though there were countless of them. Right now, Qin Wentian was already numb to it. He didn't dare to imagine how many immortals and devils were buried here. But he could be sure that this immortal palace shouldn't have been in the royal sacred region in the past. How could there be so many immortals in the royal sacred region? As they advanced through the desolate grounds, whenever Qin Wentian felt a sense of enlightenment, he would sit down and cultivate. Today, Qin Wentian finally saw the end of this desolate grounds. What appeared before Qin Wentian's eyes was a screen of light that connected the heavens and earth. Beams of multicolored light cascaded down from the heavens, cutting off the void. In the middle of the screen of light, there seemed to be numerous doors of the void. Qin Wentian's countenance stiffened. A whistling sound rang out from afar, and an instant later, Di Tian appeared with a key in his hand. This key directly transformed into an illusory form and floated forward, piercing into one of the doors of the void. An instant later, a gap appeared. Qin Wentian and Di Tian both trembled. The door of the void was opened. The key left behind by the Xia Emperor was truly useful. In that case, what secrets were hidden on the other side of the door of the void? A terrifying aura gushed forth from the other side of the door of the void, as though it originated from the primordial era. Qin Wentian's eyes flashed with a hint of struggle, after which, he stared at Di Tian as a resolute light flickered in his eyes. Since I'm already here, wouldn't it be a pity if I don't enter? Qin Wentian sighed in his heart. As the sound of his voice faded, he directly turned and departed without any hesitation. However, after he left, Di Tian's silhouette flickered as he stepped into the door of the void. A bright light flashed as the door of the void closed. The two spaces were separated once more. At this moment, Di Tian stood at the other side of the door of the void. The door of the void behind him was closed. He knew that he had no path of retreat. Di Tian was thinking that back then, the Xia Emperor actually didn't use this key. He didn't know how the Xia Emperor obtained this key. Maybe it was his strength, or maybe it was luck. Finally, there's someone else here. A hoarse voice rang out. Di Tian's countenance was as calm as ever. Since he already entered this place, no matter what he encountered, he would be able to stabilize his state of mind. Being able to come here and kill those buried immortals alone, he should have some strength, right? Haha, I wonder if we can obtain the inheritance of that old thief. If that's the case, we would have a chance to regain our freedom. Numerous voices rang out unceasingly. It was as though this place was too lonely. It had been too long since someone came here. The silent world suddenly became lively. Only by killing a buried immortal alone would one be qualified to enter this place? Di Tian's heart trembled. How powerful were the buried immortals? Being able to kill them alone meant that only those who were truly unrivaled in Heavenly Dipper would be qualified to enter this place. Old thief. Inheritance? These people should be filled with hatred towards the master of the immortal palace. Since they dared to call the master of the immortal palace an old thief, there was a very high possibility that he had already died. Di Tian swiftly deduced some useful information. He continued walking forward as the voices continued ringing out in his ears. Only at the 8th level of Heavenly Dipper. How can it be? Someone questioned. All of you stop dreaming. This old man has been here for 80,000 years. Although the number of people who could come here was extremely few, there were at least several hundred of them. Which one of them wasn't exuding magnificence through the generations? But in the end, weren't they all toyed to death by you guys and obtained the inheritance? I curse that old thief to never obtain a successor for his entire life. To think that the conditions are so harsh. Haha, you guys better be gentler, don't kill this little fellow too early, or it would be too boring. Someone cackled, treating Di Tian like a plaything. Is this a devil's nest? Di Tian felt extremely depressed. 80,000 years. There were actually people who stayed here for 80,000 years? How terrifying. They must have all gone crazy. Chapter 639. Di Tian continued walking forward step by step. This side of the gate of the void was filled with lush mountains and green rivers. Compared to the desolation on the other side, This side of the gate of the void seemed more like an ordinary world. Although the voices from earlier rang out in Dition's ears, they originated from far away. After walking for a long time, Dition finally saw a human silhouette. Not far away from him, there was a red-haired old man. His hair and beard were extremely disheveled, and his eyes were very large. He stared at Dition, his gaze filled with a terrifying might. When Dition stared at those eyes, it was like he was looking at a world of flames, enveloping him within, causing his entire body to feel incomparably hot. Not good. Dition struggled free, his eyes regained their clarity. He stared at the red-haired old man as his heart trembled. This old man was also staring at him, but he didn't move. Dition discovered that the old man's body was tied to an incomparably gigantic ancient tree. This ancient tree seemed to be circulating with a mysterious runic energy that seeped into the old man's body, forcefully binding him there, causing him to be unable to move. "Senior, do you need Junior's help?" Dition asked. The red-haired old man started. He glanced at Dition in bewilderment before he grinned. "What an interesting little fellow. Help. Why don't you give it a try?" Dition walked up as his sword chi towered up into the sky. He abruptly slashed towards the ancient tree that the old man was tied to. The incomparably sharp sword slashed through the vines, but it didn't even leave a mark on the tree. How sturdy, no wonder Senior is actually bound here. Bound? Do you think this is a tree? The red-haired old man glared at Dition. Ignorant. Dition felt somewhat awkward. Let's go ahead and take a look. The red-haired old man berated. Dition nodded and continued walking forward. He saw someone not far away who was being suppressed beneath a mountain. This mountain was filled with spiritual chi, and the long hair of that person had already covered his face. He inclined his head and grinned at Dition. It's been a long time since I've seen an outsider. How lonely. Brat, be careful. The people here have all gone crazy. They will toy with you to death. A voice rang out in Dition's mind, causing him to start. After which, he turned his head back and stared at the red-haired old man with gratitude. Dition continued walking forward. He saw a lake with a long-haired maiden in it. She was extremely beautiful and her eyes were as deep as the ocean. When she glanced at Dition, her gaze was as cold as ice. She slowly walked forward, causing ripples to form on the surface of the lake. That maiden seemed to be unable to walk out of the lake. This kind of temperament is too perfect. Dition stared at the maiden in the lake. Although the countenance of this maiden couldn't be compared to Qing, and Mo Qingqing, the aura she exuded was even more outstanding. She was like a true celestial maiden, yet her eyes were so dim and lifeless, as though she was a living corpse. This caused Dition's heart to tremble, as he felt his entire body stiffening. They were originally immortals, yet they were reduced to such a state, trapped for 80,000 years. Who could understand this type of pain? He stepped onto the path of cultivation at the age of 16, pursuing the path of cultivation. How arduous was his journey! The road ahead was long, with no end in sight. If one day, he became an immortal and was trapped in such a state, how much despair would he feel? As he thought of this, Dition's heart was deeply stirred. He stared deeply at the maiden in front of him, only to see her treating him like nothing. Turning his head, Dition returned to the red-haired old man and asked, "Senior, have your cultivation bases and bodies been sealed?" The red-haired old man glanced at Dition as a surge of heat gushed forth. "Yes, they've been sealed." "How can we break the seal?" Dition asked. "Break the seal?" All of a sudden, a loud laughter rang out. It was none other than the person who was trapped under the mountain. He laughed maniacally. "You don't know the immensity of the heavens and earth. If you want to break the seal, you have to defeat all of us first. Blast your way through and at the very end, you will be able to cultivate the abilities of that old thief. At that time, you can then talk about breaking the seal." "Senior, is it really possible?" Dition stared at the red-haired old man. The red-haired old man saw the sincerity in Dition's eyes. He then asked, "Do you really want to help us break the seal?" "Emichim." Dition calmly nodded. "Sadly, Junior's strength is too weak." "Why?" the red-haired old man asked. "Since you can come here, As long as you obtain the inheritance, you can even control all of us, turning us into your strongest weapons. In that case, do you still want to break the seal? Di Tian's heart stirred, but he still smiled and shook his head. The path of cultivation is extremely difficult. Junior has been pursuing the path of cultivation, hoping that one day I can become an immortal, free and unfettered, free and unfettered. Seniors, you are all already immortals. You should be free and unfettered in the world of mortals. Yet Senior is restrained by an ancient tree. That Senior is suppressed by the mountain, unable to lift his head. As for the maiden in the lake, she is as graceful as a celestial being. Yet her eyes are filled with emptiness. Junior has always been clear about gratitude and grudges. I have no grudges with seniors. Even if I obtain the inheritance, why would I be trapped here? This isn't the Tao I'm pursuing. Di Tian's eyes gleamed brightly as he stood with his hands clasped behind his back. He pursued the path of cultivation at the age of 16. How many supercilious eyes did he encounter? How much contempt did he receive? The Tao he pursued was to be free and unfettered, free and unfettered, free and unfettered in the world of mortals. The red-haired old man stared into Di Tian's eyes. There was a kind of pursuit, a kind of obsession. There was no falsehood at all. The red-haired old man couldn't help but to laugh maniacally. At this moment, the entire space trembled as he laughed maniacally. There were hundreds of people who entered this place. All of them were extremely ruthless, wanting to trample on our corpses to strengthen themselves. You are the first one who dared to speak ill of this old thief. If you were the one who obtained this old thief's inheritance, how interesting would that be? At this moment, the entire space fell silent. An instant later, someone from afar roared. How do you know this man isn't extremely scheming? It's not like we haven't met such a character before. Then just take it that I'm blind. It's been 80,000 years. If he can deceive my eyes, I have nothing to say. So what if I do my best to help him? In addition, even if we want to help him, it would depend on his own capabilities. If he really can't be nurtured, I will personally kill him. The red-haired old man spoke in a loud voice. After which, he stared at Di Tian as he continued. Remember, everyone here is sealed. Within the radius of the seal, they can only unleash strength at the peak of Heavenly Dipper. If you can start from me and sweep through them one by one, only then would you have a chance to obtain this old thief's inheritance. We don't have our memories sealed. We are much stronger compared to those fellows who were buried outside. Just make your move. Other than not killing you, we won't be polite to you. The red-haired old man spoke to Di Tian. Junior will naturally do my best. Di Tian nodded. He stared at the red-haired old man as his true intent gushed forth. Staring at him, the true intent of Dreamscape appeared. A fiery red world, akin to a sea of fire. This was a dreamscape. In this dreamscape, Di Tian discovered that he was buried within the sea of fire. He stared at the red-haired old man walking towards him as a look of defeat appeared on his face. True intent of Dreamscape? I know it as well. Fiery red chains appeared from the sea of fire, binding Di Tian. After which, the red-haired old man took out a fiery halberd that was branded with a fiery red, and pierced it into Di Tian's body. Arg! A scream of misery rang out from Di Tian's mouth. His countenance was pale white as an expression of agony could be seen on his countenance. He was brought into purgatory by the red-haired old man's true intent of Dreamscape, and he actually had no way to break free. After a long time, the red-haired old man released the true intent of Dreamscape. Di Tian's entire body was devoid of strength as sweat drenched his entire body. He was even weaker than after fighting for an entire day and night. If someone wanted to kill him now, it would be extremely easy. You can go to the front. Your usage of true intent is still too weak. The red-haired old man spoke to Di Tian, causing Di Tian to nod his head. His current strength could be considered at the peak amongst Heavenly Dipper sovereigns in the outside world. But in front of the red-haired old man, he was simply too weak. After resting for a moment, stabilizing his state of mind, Di Tian walked to the lake. He stared at Fairy Lingbo as he bowed. Fairy, please guide me. Walala. The lake water roared as it instantly gushed towards Di Tian. A bone-chilling aura corroded Dition's body. Dition soared up into the air, only to see the lake water coiling around him like a flood dragon. Boom! Dition's true intent erupted forth as he soared up into the air, causing towering waves to surge up into the sky. However, at this instant, the flood dragon seemed to have solidified, becoming incomparably heavy. This wasn't just a single true intent, it was a fusion of true intents. Dition's entire body radiated a towering aura as he soared up into the air. However, the entire lake water coiled around his body and flung him towards the shore. The silhouette of Fairy Lingbo continued walking on the lake, as though nothing had happened. Dition continued forward and found an expert sitting on a stone platform. That expert had a long spear in his hands, and the tip of the spear gleamed with the light of lightning. With just a single strike, the terrifying lightning energy instantly caused Dition's entire body to go numb. After which, that lightning spear transformed into a bolt of lightning that shot past Dition's head. That was a true bolt of lightning, and it instantly streaked past Dition's head. If he wanted to kill Dition, a single strike would suffice. Too strong. Dition truly felt the disparity between them. However, he didn't feel disappointed at all. How terrifying was the control an immortal had over a true intent. Most probably, this was just a casual strike from them. If they could fuse their true intents together, it would be even more terrifying. Dition started the path of being oppressed. However, these people had truly shown mercy and didn't kill him. If not, he would have already died several times over. With immortals personally clashing against him, Dition's strength improved at an astonishing speed. Every day, he would frenziedly absorb the experience and comprehend unceasingly. After a month, his usage of true intents had also become much more terrifying. As for the other dimension, Qin Wentian was also cultivating with his eyes closed. When Dition battled, he would comprehend, and when Dition comprehended, he would continue to comprehend. By doing so, his strength would improve even faster. In addition, Qin Wentian had already started to attempt to fuse true intents together. It was similar to what he did in the grass hut. Once he fused true intents together, he would fuse them into an innate technique, causing the might of his innate technique to be even more terrifying. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.